the same. I see sun, you see rain, cleaning up the mess you left behind.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for your attendance. My name is Benjamin Gadan, Director of the Program for Latin America of Wilson Center. We are an academic center based in Washington, United States, and we're truly happy to be here this morning with all of you. I would first like to greet all of the U.S. member officials, the Undersecretary Jose Fernandez of the U.S. Department of State, and from the EPA, and from our embassy, Bernadette Meehan, U.S. Ambassador to Chile, as well as the Chilean authorities will be participating, the Ministry of Energy, Pardo, and Undersecretary de la Fuente, ministries, academicians, and other participants from ECLAC and other stakeholders that are participating in this complicated but encouraging matter that we're dealing with today, with great impacts for the human beings of both hemispheres. It is a pleasure to be here in Santiago. Welcome to the conference on climate action and the energy transition between the US and Chile. With today's event, we are launching not only a 2-day conference in Santiago, but a new initiative, a brand new initiative that's called the Wilson Center Initiative on Energy Transition in Latin America. This is an initiative to deepen and widen another one of our initiatives that's called the Lithium Triangle Initiative that we launched a few years ago with the goal of promoting and enhancing the development of lithium in a sustainable fashion and to respond to the large worldwide demand. We have now the goal to acknowledge that Latin America has a role in the production of critical minerals for the production of batteries and renewable energies, and in the manufacture of clean technologies, which is why we have invited such a diverse panel for the discussions that will take place today. The role of Latin America in this transformation is key. The region has vast and indispensable resources of critical minerals, deep concentration, and vast concentration that is why we see Chile playing its role in catalyzing these resources for the benefits of its own economy and participating in international efforts to help solve the climate crisis that we are living. These critical minerals have a key potential for the regional economies. If we're all speaking of lithium, the region has over 60% of the ore deposits globally, and that is 60% of the lithium. 20 out of that 6%, 26 coming from this country. The region has these critical minerals, but not only found in its large deposits, but this commitment is found in the civil society demanding the high standards in the relations with communities where these minerals are mined. These values make countries like Chile worth, well, worthy countries, offering the possibilities of creating value chains for the industries of the future. At the same time, Latin America is a fertile ground for other types of climate actions and nearshoring actions in that category. I would set the production of renewable energies and the development of green hydrogen. We are not in Chile by chance. As I see it, Chile is an example in this paradigm of how Latin America can accelerate the energy transition in the world with benefits for the region and the planet. Given this huge potential, the strategic relationship that United States has with Chile offers big opportunities for collaboration in this matter. There's a solid basis, and a proof of that is the recent and successful visit of President Gabriel Boric to the White House a couple of days ago, where the ambassador will not let me lie, but the relationship is shown as prosperous in several aspects. Chile has already been positioned as a leader in this sector, as an international benchmark, with over 40 companies, for instance, from a dozen of countries have expressed their interest in the different parts of the value chain with the launch of the new Chile Lithium National Strategy, and its production of renewable energy is increasing with more investment, with more foreign and local investment, though Chile could play an even more important role. There's no time to waste. Of course, the global energy transition, including the fast transformation of strategic industries such as the automotive industry, is urgent given the climate phenomena that we are living, as the loss of biodiversity in the whole world. Hopefully, efforts like this will highlight the efforts in Chile and in this region for climate action, and that it becomes a pillar between the relationship of the United States and Chile. In order to deepen this even more, tomorrow we'll hold the conference Wilson Center AmCham on climate financing for Chile, Latin America. Hopefully, we can have you there as well to continue having these conversations to support the role of the civil society, the governments, and the industry. And to conclude this, I would like to thank our partners that made this event possible, including the Department of State, the Embassy of the United States in Chile, our ambassador here in Santiago, and her large team here, Elvir and Eklag. Having your participation shows the leadership and the commitment of governments to move effectively, orderly, and efficiently in the production of clean energy and the use of critical minerals and the use of value chains to make a much needed energy transition possible. Finally, I would like to acknowledge my colleague Andres Beal participation to make this event possible. Thank you. Now we'll listen to a few words by my colleague Maria Florencia Atatemo-Hurt, General Manager of the Southern Con and Country Representative in Chile of the Inter-American Development Bank. On behalf of the Inter-America Development Bank, I warmly welcome you to this valuable event that gathers key stakeholders to move forward in energy transition and climate action. I will start by thanking Wilson Center and its program for Latin America and Chile, to the Embassy of the United States in Chile, and the authorities here present, the members of the private sphere, and AmCham for the organization of this event, and for the interest in collaborating in the search for solutions to the climate crisis, harvesting all of the actions from the decarbonization of the economies. In particular, in Chile, we are very excited for this opportunity to continue having this dialogue between the private, public, and areas, the academia, and the civil society, to help us know more about the best paths towards decarbonization and to coordinate cooperation among all of the different stakeholders. Chile has committed to the development of a sustainable energy sector that will guarantee trust, reliability, and quality of the service, and at the same time respecting the environment. and reaching carbon neutrality towards 2050. For that a goal, along with the IDB, it has promoted the agenda for 2026, the roadmap of the government to improve the quality of life of people and promoting actions towards social, ecological transition that's fair. The update of the energy policy nationwide to focus the development of the sector in the long term, the increase of the installed wind and solar energy to 21.4% in the past 4 years, the plan to move forward in the closure of coal-based electricity plants and mining. It is for projected that the use of critical minerals, it is critical for it to be doubled in the next decade. Chile is the world leader in the production of copper and lithium, and these are key inputs for the use of low emission or no emission transportation and renewable energies. With the support of the IDB, we are hoping to create an ambitious policy for 2050 aligned with the goals that for the energy sector have been proposed with the launch of the national strategy for lithium. Our support is along with the together with the private sector is to create investments and to generate socially inclusive investments based on avant-garde knowledge and international practices of excellence through different actions such as the modernization of the electrical network and the removal or of the coal-based industry and the advancement of the solar and wind plants and in particular with the development of green hydrogen, a matter in which we were the first multilateral banking institution to give financial resources to create this industry. It is for that reason that we'll work to make more investments in clean energies and to update the regulatory framework for these ambitious goals to be accomplished for the transformation that the country has set forth. We additionally hope to extend this initiative to other countries in the Southern Cone and promote integration. This is a huge opportunity to implement these alliances with the aim of solving sectoral problems. I again thank Wilson Center and its program for Latin America, the U.S. Embassy in Chile, the authorities that are here, and everyone who will be joining us in this two-day conference. Important members of the private sector. Again, my thanks to AmCham for their collaboration and interest in partnering with us to promote the growth and in the green infrastructure of the region. Good morning and thank you. Thank you so much and welcome. We just heard from Ms. Florencia Tanemujirt from the Inter-American Development Bank. It is a pleasure to have you all here in person, and also we welcome our virtual audience. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Jose Fernandez, Undersecretary for Economic Growth, Energy and Environment of the U.S. Department of State. Undersecretary, please. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for inviting me to this talk. I would like to thank Wilson Center, thanks to the Inter-American Development Bank, the embassy in Santiago. We have our ambassador here. Thanks for coming. And thanks to the different colleagues from the Chilean government, including the Undersecretary de la Fuente. Thank you for being here. We're at a good time. As Benjamin, I agree with Benjamin when he mentioned the fact that President Gabriel Boric was holding a very important and successful meeting in the U.S. We're speaking of a 200-year relationship, foreign affairs and treaties. Chile is a leader in this field, and not only a leader in the matter of clean energy, but in terms of the efforts that we must all do to fight climate change. And this wasn't easy. This is work that Chile has been conducting for several years. It has created a very competitive energy market. It has held high leadership in the energy policy sphere worldwide, with a foreign investment atmosphere that has attracted many companies. And in the recent years, we've seen Chile leading COP25 and was the host in 21 of green energy initiatives, and organized the Americas for the Protection of the Oceans Coalition. In all of these matters, Chile has shown leadership that proves that both of our agendas, the agenda of President Biden and President Boric in this area, are very much alive. Chile is a democracy that prove that Chile is a leader and the ideal partner to support the creation of jobs and for the economic growth that these new efforts can bring in green energy. Hopefully, this dialogue today will lead us to concrete opportunities, not so much about the philosophy, but specific projects to further cooperate between Chile and the United States to accelerate the global energy transition that we must all aim to. The good news is that we are not starting from scratch. We have a long list of cooperation programs among our countries to fight climate change and to have an energy framework that is much cleaner. In the United States, this has been, in terms of clean energy, it's been very important for the administration. A year ago, President Biden signed what we call the Inflation Reduction Act. That is the most important effort that is being made worldwide and historically in climate change. And it refers to an investment of almost $370 million in industries of climate change that will benefit all of us, not only in terms of electric vehicles, but for green hydrogen, wind energy, wind power, etc. It's an effort that, well, we were being accused in the United States of speaking much about these efforts but not doing much about it. So it's a tremendous investment, and I believe that will benefit all of us. One lesson that we have learned in this effort to promote green energy is that our private sectors and our governments can act jointly to be partners in these efforts. And that is why we are so thankful that the North American Energy Minister, Jennifer Granholm, and Mr. Pardo here recently signed an agreement to deepen our technical cooperation in matters of green energy, to modernize the electricity grid, to exploit critical minerals, and to help in the Chilean efforts to have green hydrogen and to overall to act jointly so that we can get to that future that we all expect in terms of green energy. Chile is one of the 8 countries that signed the Net Zero World Initiative that brings the experience and the knowledge from the US laboratories in this field to help governments throughout the world, nationally and regionally, to make decisions, to help them make decisions based on climate change and energy. and to promote the transition that we all want to make in this area. Chile is one of the countries that signed a political commitment, the ninth summit of the Americas, our Sustainable Green Future Summit. The intention is to make the ambitions of the Paris Accords concrete so that this continent can become a leader in the creation of sustainable economies together with sustainable energy policies. I will address two topics before I finish. We see opportunities of working with Chile first in green hydrogen, green and clean hydrogen. This hemisphere has all the tools that it needs to become a leader in this field, and that's something where Chile has been focused, and this country has plans to decarbonize its economy as well as to convert green hydrogen into an export opportunity, at the same time to create more employment and to benefit with financial growth all of our citizens. It has wind, sun, and possibilities to transport it. But to promote green hydrogen, Chile is not alone. There's not a single week in Washington where I don't receive communications from Chile where about Chile where they don't tell me that they can be a leader. And I'm telling this because it's a competition and we cannot waste time. In the Department of State, it's part of the US government, we want to help Chile reach this goal of green hydrogen because it can benefit us all. This technical collaboration with Chile to promote the decarbonization of Chilean economy and to advance in export opportunities. There are many American companies working on green hydrogen, and we are trying to find the way to continue supporting and improving this collaboration through our organization recently created the Americas Partnership for Economic Prosperity, APEP, in which Chile is a founding partner. We want Chile to be one of the leaders to show and to teach the entire hemisphere what the best practices are to promote the green hydrogen industry. And Chile's leadership and experience is something of great value for all of us. The other matter that I would like to address now is critical minerals, the plans that we all have, and the need and urgency that we all have to create a green future for our children and our grandchildren is an opportunity that, in our opinion, happens every 20, 30 years. This is a generation with the opportunity to be the leader in the production and processing of critical minerals. To give you one example, the International Agency of Energy tells us that we are going to need 42 times, this is not a typo, 42 times the lithium that we are using today to reach our goals in 2050. This is an opportunity for Chile, an opportunity that we would like to help you accomplish and benefit from, which is why we are appreciating all of the steps that Chile is taking to position itself as a supplier of critical minerals, including lithium, including copper. Not only for the mining of these minerals, but for its processing as well. So the added value activities That is why we are talking with the Chilean government to see how we can cooperate in this field. And this is not only about mining the minerals, but to promote the best practices that are responsible, that are respectful of the employment standards, labor standards, environmental standards, working along with the communities to make sure that the communities are being favored by mining in many areas of the world. We're seeing that mining projects sometimes see a lot of resistance from the communities. We have a chance to change that, to work with the communities and show them that mining could be a driver to change the economy at the same time, responding to a need of this generation and the next. We are willing to invest in the United States and in the field of mining with these minerals to do this sustainably, responsibly, and society in partnership with the local communities. That is why we are adhering to the global standards, the best and highest standards of efficiency and sustainability, environmental sustainability. And we have examples with North American companies that are based in Chile, working in Chile, not only applying environmental and social standards and governance and transparency standards, but are accomplishing these targets, meeting the goals. We have the example of the Labra mine site that 2 years ago received the copper mark, the certification that is an award, an award that shows that this company has responsible production practices and is contributing to the sustainable agenda of the UN. Sustainability is part of their priorities, and they're implemented several hydrological models to guarantee, to ensure there is an environmental balance. And they're done several efforts. They're made several efforts to collaborate with the communities as well. In the U.S. Department, together with 13 other countries, we've created the Mineral Security Partnership is a group of 14 economies, 13 countries, but number 14 is the European Union, where we represent over 50% of the global GDP, where we share information and jointly fund projects and work on the recycling of critical minerals too. Why? Because from now to 10 years, we know that 10 to 50% of the batteries of vehicles will not come from recycled minerals, and we need to be able to provide this. To accomplish all of this, we are fulfilling and aiming to the highest standards. We have announced 4 projects worldwide that we are developing, and we'll see the light shortly. And again, it's about looking to projects not only in the mining field, but the value added so that countries that can benefit from them can. And this is where I finish. I wish you a very fruitful conference. I believe that if you can take a single message from my intervention, is that this is an opportunity that we are living in the field of critical minerals that is hardly seen in a generation. We will need the collaboration of the industry, governments, and other partners, such as universities, for this opportunity to become a reality. There's a reason why when Secretary Blinken was in Chile last year, one of the things he did was to visit the National Electricity Coordinator in Chile, and that was to see how Chile was promoting the generation of renewable energy. It is because Chile is a leader in renewable energy, it is a leader in fighting the climate crisis, and it can be a partner, a primary partner in this continent to promote the green future that we all want. Thank you for inviting us, and hopefully, you have a great conference. Thank you.
Thank you to the subsecretary. Now, for it is an honor to hand the floor to Mr. Jose Manuel Salazar Sirinach. Can you tell me if I pronounced it correctly? He is the executive secretary of CEPA, of CELAC. Good morning, Gloria de la Fuente, Subsecretary of the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Chile, and Honorable Subsecretary Jose Fernandez of the Department of the States of the United States, Bernadette Bingham, Ambassador of the United States, Mr. Benjamin Guerra, Director of the Latin American Program of Wilson Center, and leaders, young leaders on climate change, Isis Ismaila and Sebastian, and all of the entrepreneurs here present and people that are participating in this conference. It is an honor to be here with you. Thank you to the Bede and Wilson Center and the Embassy of the United States and all of the other co organizers of this event. It's been at least 15 years was ECLAC analyzes the impact of climate change in the region. And us, together with the world, we have learned many things about this climate impact. We know that the cost of not of having no action is higher than acting on it. So this is true on the expenses priority and investments being in the reduction of the climate change and the gas effect and the also average that will have place in the years to come. We know that the impacts are non-linear, but they grow with the growth of the temperature, of course, the rise of the temperature. Every day we get news of the how this is going up more than what we have foreseen. We know that meteorological events that are extreme, or like El Nino or La Nina, that affect particularly the Caribbean and Central America, will have even more devastating effects in the years to come. We know that behind these facts, we have things that are hidden behind that in this agricultural sector, transport, ecotourism, and also in the human relations, for example. We know that the consequences are not only economical consequences, but they're mainly social consequences because they have an impact on the most vulnerable group of people, and these people will have to migrate looking for better opportunities. We know that the emissions would reduce tomorrow to zero, the temperature will still rise and keep rising as a result of the gases that are already in the atmosphere and that have not reached the superior layers. That is why the investment in adaptation is very important and something that is quite urgent, not only to avoid any impact, but also to save lives. In our last economical studies, has an impact of the climate change in 6 countries, and the result is that these countries can see their GDP being reduced in between 8 and 12% from today till 2050 as a result of the impact related with the climate change. Finally, we know that the transition towards lower emission economies, hopefully carbon neutral, require a structural massive changes in the whole world to transform our production models and consumption models and change them. We know that our civilization depend a lot on concrete, in iron, and the fertilizers based in nitrate and plastics, and including those that are used to fabricate electrical cars or manufacture electrical cars. We know that these all contribute to carbon emissions, and we are far from achieving carbon neutral food production. Without a doubt, the transition to lower emission economies require change that we have an impact in all of the nations, and the growth of jobs also, and a public income, and the demands of public funding, and the global chain, uh, value chain, and international commerce, and others. We have a opportunity to act on it, and that is this window is closing, and we need to recognize that this transition is urgent, and we need to act like we understand that facing climate change is a huge opportunity for the region, just like the subsecretary just mentioned. Why? Because the investment in climate action can generate income, not only environmentally speaking, but also socially speaking and economically speaking. Why? Because we think that this effort that requires for that is required for climate change, we change the to carbon neutral, and we also have promote jobs and economical growth. And in a region that is, like we said, sick in low growth and low investment. What I can say is that between 2014 and 2023, the growth rate, the average growth rate was only of 0.8% per year for the region. We have 2 months to finish the year, and one more year that is gone. We have lost more than the 80s, in the 80s, where we say that we lost all those times, and we have less investment. The growth, we should see that the average growth in the of jobs in this last decade was only one of 0.2% in the last 10 years. This is the lowest rate of job growth in the last 7 decades. If we keep growing like this in growth and production, we will not be able to transform ourselves in more, and we will keep having societies that will be violent, more people will migrate, and we will lose democracy, because the democratic life is not compatible with the economy that cannot move forward, and economical and groups that are frustrated without any hope for the future. That's why in ECLAC we think that building a more productive future, and inclusive and sustainable future, gives us and will lead us to agenda with three main steps. It's a trinity of hope. They are not they are interconnected, they cannot be separated, and this is the future for new development. First, a more productive development, because productivity is the one that determines your day-to-day life in the future, and to be leave the low growth, we need to escalate the productive policies for new generations. And second, a more inclusive development. Inclusion is a subject that we think, when we think about it, we only think about tributary political policies, and this is key, and it's okay, but it is not possible to change poverty and informality if we have more growth and a workforce that generates more and better jobs, and a more sustainable development. That this means that the growth must be amicable with nature and with the world, with the planet. And one interesting thing I would like to highlight is that the same thing happens the other way around, because when we accelerate to on carbon neutrality, it is we want to create more jobs and inclusion, and the transformation for carbon neutrality requires investments in technology, and their new private ecosystems and public goods, and physical and human capital. So this is also a promotion for growth and production transformation and social production, and the other two pillars of this trinity that I mentioned before. So in our point of view, there is no contradiction between growth and the planet, neither between growth and inequality. What we need is a certain type of growth. In other words, the way that we go against low growth and unsustainable growth is not is changing our path, and to be able to make this a reality, countries have to bet in impulse in promotion that can vary depending on country, depending in each country, and which includes, amongst other things, the energy transition and is sustainable transportation based on electromobility, economic circular economy, the handling, sustainable handling of water, agriculture for safety, food safety, pharmaceutical industry, and science of life, exporting services, modern services that are free of plastic, etc. In the other sectors that have good opportunities to promote a more inclusive and sustainable future. And the product of these areas are a higher growth rate, which all of these countries need urgently. The good news is that the country of Latin America and the Caribbean have shown their ambition while facing climate change, and they have agreed to reduce their emissions until 2030 to 24% compared to the future scenario. This allows to multiply between 2 and 4 times the speed of decarbonization of the region. This means that we need a strategy that not only compels the transport area but also agricultural area, the management of residues, and etc. between other areas. There is huge synergy between economical activities and that I just mentioned. In CELAC, the investment necessary to be able to achieve the goal determined by each of the countries, which means the nationally determined contributions is between 3.7 and 4.9% of the annual GDP. These are investments that are focused on certain areas that I just mentioned before, which help to reduce the ecological footprint. We have done many studies to be able to look for funding and find investments. And this is the type of problems that we're facing right now. Most of the projects that we have identified, although they are important and strategic, did they not have sufficient requirements to make it so attractive to the private investors? And this involved many of the strategic projects that would help the transition and opens up space for work that requires different tasks, from regulation for new markets to innovation in financial products till the training of financing of projects for the developers. Here we have a gap that is important that we have identified. This is something very practical and concrete to be able to move forward with the level of investments that we require. And the value chain of new industries related with the energetic transition. This transition is implementing, like the subsecretariat exposed quite well, opens huge opportunities for the regions in minerals like lithium, graphite, cobalt, magnesium, and amongst others. These concentrated geographically, the regions of the countries of the region, like Chile, has huge reserves, world reserves of these minerals. And of course, this promotes also the geopolitical competence of these minerals, or fighting for competition of these minerals. And we have challenges to go beyond in the production of raw materials, the processing, and to advance in the manufacturing of batteries and their components. We have talked with Karina Fernandez from Stark. There is a huge debate that is very interesting that we have to move forward in this area. A lot of ideas in work and in this area. So I'm putting this area on this subject on the table. I think this is very important to discuss in this conference. And to conclude, I would like to recognize the work of Chile. And in the context of the transition towards decarbonization, Chile has been a reference to other countries in the region, be it because of our ambition on the greenhouse gas and the sectors that are key in technological solutions that are necessary to undergo this transition globally. And their national contribution determined on 2020 in the commitment of mitigation of, in Chile, a 30% of reduction in the balance of greenhouse gas between till the year of 2030, regarding 2016 that can increment in 25 and 45% under certain conditions. Chile is one of the few countries in the region that is committed for carbon neutrality for 2050. This commitment is in this strategy for climate change of June of 2022. On the other hand, Chile has abundance of one of the most critical minerals for the energy transition in the world, like copper and lithium, and one of the best world conditions for producing green hydrogen, I already mentioned, because of their wind and solar energy. Be it the strategy of lithium of or green hydrogen, they look for to add capital, sustainability, and added value to both areas and sectors together in balance with the local communities. And of course, this alliance between Chile and the United States for climate change or climate action and the energy transition can accelerate both countries and create mutual benefits for both nations. From ECLAC, I would like to see and do a follow up with these alliances to create a more productive and inclusive future and sustainable future. And so I wish you a productive workday. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, señor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Salazar Sirinas with ECLAC. It is a pleasure for me to give the floor to Mrs. Gloria de la Fuente. Mrs. Gloria de la Fuente is the Undersecretary of Foreign Affairs from the Chilean government. Mrs. Undersecretary, please.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning, everyone. It is an honor to be here today joining you in this great activity that is to reinforce our bonds with the United States. But I would like to start by greeting Mr. Jose Fernandez, Director of the program, Mr. The Wilson Center, and Director Jose Manuel Salazar, Executive Secretary of the ECLAC, our Ambassador, Bernadette Meehan, U.S. Ambassador, and leaders of climate change action, filling us with hope to the future. A few days ago, as it was reminded, a few minutes ago, President Boric met with President Joe Biden in the White House in the framework of a visit meant to strengthen our bonds of political and economic cooperation beyond the agenda. These meeting accounted for the good relationship of 200 years of history. In this bilateral relationship, we have looked at the past, taking important lessons for both nations. Nonetheless, we also consider this anniversary as an opportunity to look at the future of our friendship and to address jointly the vast challenges of our time. And when we are talking about these challenges, it is unquestionable that climate change holds the most important place. The trends that science shows us is that the climate change will continue to increase as the greenhouse emissions increase on a daily basis. What a few years ago seemed to be hypothetical and dystopic and far scenarios from a long time now seem concerning reality. Climate crisis is knocking our doors with particular severity, those who are more vulnerable and without infrastructure. It is about who often have the least responsibility in this matter. Climate crisis is affecting International relations significantly beyond im- economic and environmental impact, it is necessary to address social impacts and the large gaps of inequality within and between countries that make this global challenge a priority for all of us. In Chile and in Latin America and in the United States and in Chile, the civil society is demanding more action to face the consequences derived from our democracies. Now, aware of the multidimensional nature of the climate crisis in Chile, we have set forth very challenging goals in this area around the world. We have acted with conviction, putting the protection of our oceans and the environment in our top climate policies. Our NDCs include mitigation measures, adaptation measures that are very ambitious, and resilience measures too, as we are promoting adaptation measures as key according to the Paris Agreement. It is also important to mention that Chile has a framework law for climate change that establishes the goal the country to become carbon neutral and resilient to climate at the most by 2050, date that could even be accelerated if the circumstances allow for it. This, of course, will have to be balanced, but the legislation that I mentioned underscores the importance of transitioning towards a clean energy grid based on renewable energies. And in this line, Chile has played an active and important role in this path towards the energy transition that is fair, allowing to incorporate renewable potential of the country in the national energy grid, respecting the communities and all the territories. To fulfill this, we have developed a series of initiatives and public policies oriented to these targets, including the publication of the fair strategy and the subsequent agenda for the energy transition, containing 6 actions for the decarbonization of the energy sector. Aligned with these efforts and given the potential that it has to decarbonize the economy, mainly the high consuming sectors, Chile has focused part of its efforts to develop a national industry of green hydrogen, with which it expects not only to meet the targets of carbon neutrality, but also to contribute through the export of this product to other countries that wish to do so in the same way. As you well know, and as this conference well reflects, we want to make this viable, and this requires all of us to work jointly among governments, but also to work between the public and the private spheres. This is indispensable for economies that are low in emissions are also climate resilient. This shows the spirit of Chile's pavilion next COP28, where we hope to have an exchange space of experiences between the public sphere and the civil society and the private area. Chile expects for COP28 to be successful and that we have results that are really up to what is expected, with ambitious results, where this instance will be where we can balance our outcomes since Paris. The results must reflect the urgency of our actions in all fronts of climate action in this decade. Dear friends, the Chilean government celebrates and thanks for the initiative of the prestigious Wilson Center to conduct this timely and valuable initiative where governments converge, as well as the private and public sector towards a transition that will make the use of energy, renewable energy, more massive, and we are committed to make these efforts more visible through multilateral dialogue and participatory dialogue. We will move forward to another possible future. I am certain that the discussions that will take place during this event will be very useful to find new experiences and ways to strengthen our cooperation in this area. We will certainly be paying attention from this Ministry of Foreign Affairs to the conclusions. From the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Government of Chile, we wish you a fruitful session. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, subsecretaria.
Thank you so much, Undersecretary. It is a pleasure for us to start with the panels that we have prepared for today. I would like to welcome the participants of the first panel, Emerging Leaders in Climate Action, Achieving a Sustainable Future Together. With that, I start introducing Sebastián Benfeld, founder and president of Fundación Escazú Ahora. Mrs. Isis Riquelme, co-founder and CEO of Tremendas Foundation. Mrs. Ismaela Magliotto, executive director of Uno Cinco, as well as our moderator of this event, Mrs. Bernadette Meehan, U.S. Ambassador to Chile. Thank you very much.
¿Me escucha?
Hello. Good morning. It is a pleasure to be here, be part of this panel. Voy a hablar en inglés. Espero que
So let me start by saying that I am so pleased that the U.S. Embassy is able to support this conference in partnership with the Wilson Center. And I am delighted to see so many influential decision makers from the U.S. and the Chilean governments, but also from our multilateral partners who play such an important role. We have members of the government, the private sector, academia, and civil society. And for me, that's particularly important because really when we think about climate action and moving forward on this topic, it really is going to take a whole of ecosystem approach. And so I think it's particularly important that we hear the voices from all of those sectors. This year, as we know, we are celebrating 200 years of the official relationship between the United States and Chile. And our theme is Socios para un futuro mejor, partners for a better future. And I can't think of a slogan that is more applicable to this particular conference because climate change is perhaps, I think anyone who is here would agree, perhaps the most important threat facing the future of humanity. And in fact, as we all know, Presidents Biden and Boric met last week on Thursday in the Oval Office, and President Biden said to President Boric that in his opinion, climate action, climate change is the only existential threat facing humanity. That for everything else that we're working on, there are very important topics in the world, as we all know, but this is the one existential threat that we have to focus on together. So we need collective action, guidance, coordination, motivation from civil society, innovation, adaptation, and corporate responsibility from the private sector, research and invention from academia and the scientific community, and resources and leadership, and dare I say, courage from governments to make difficult decisions. So I am particularly glad that I get to moderate this panel because one of the things that I am always fond of saying, and this was the view of my old boss, President Obama, who has always had a focus on emerging leaders, is that really young people deserve a strong voice because it is their future. The decisions that we, the old people, make today, these are the folks that have to live with the consequences of those decisions. And so for me, it's particularly important to have this opportunity to hear from some of the emerging voices who have been doing such great work on this topic. So I'd like to introduce our panelists, and then we will dive right in. I'm joined by Isis Riquelme, who is the spokesperson for Tremendas, an organization dedicated to empowering young women to be change makers. Sebastián Benfeld, founder and president, Escaso Ahora, an organization dedicated to getting Chile to join and comply with the agreement. And Ismaela Magaliotto, it sounds very Italian, co-founder and general coordinator of 1.5, which advances collective actions aligned with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals of limiting the rise in global temperatures to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. So I'd like to start the conversation with a question for Isis. At 17 years old, you created Plan B for Education, Latin America's first environmental education system, which provides educational tools to students to support climate change mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. You also represented Tremendas at COP27, where you and Ismaela participated in multiple panels on how young women are educated by and educated on and impacted by climate change. Since Tremendas was launched, we've gone through a pandemic. We've had the Estadio Social here in Chile, the global economic crisis, and international conflicts. We've seen dramatic increases in regional insecurity and economic instability. So my question is two parts. With so many challenges in the world, how do we ensure that the focus on combating climate change is not lost in all of the other things we're focusing on? And many of these challenges disproportionately impact young women. I am a firm believer, and the evidence shows that you cannot solve global challenges without the participation of women, despite what some in the world might think. So, have you gained any unique perspectives on this from your work on climate change education with young women?
Thank you so much. I am speaking in Spanish para poder explayarme mejor. Bueno, son hartas las consecuencias y sobre todo, bueno, CEPAL también que
This and ECLAC that presented earlier have developed several figures of impact for women, particularly. One that is most interesting for us women is that we have 14 times more likely to die. In times of drought, who are more likely to die are women and children. So for 2050, we are expected to be 80% of the climate migrants. Why is this expected? Because today we are 70% of the world, 70% of the world most poor, and in situations of catastrophe, women, well, first, what do we die? We're usually in care situations, not in climate-related disasters, but 27 of February 2010 in Chile, most of the victims, for instance, in Constitución, that passed away were women and children on an island celebrating a cultural event, and the mothers stayed at home with their children. They couldn't escape, so they died. An impact. These are not isolated events. Many of the women that have passed because of climate events are women in care situations that were not given any assistance from their governments or schools. They didn't know what to do in case of emergency, so we have big barriers. And added to that, in case of disasters, it has been studied that after disasters, children, females particularly, are forced to leave, are forced to marry, and these childs, and many people that were displaced, or at least 50%, have suffered abuse and human trafficking, among others. So the impacts of disasters are bigger for us women, but we can be part of the solution. In the Droughton Project, conducted scientific studies to know what were the most effective ways to fight climate change, determined that the children's education was more effective than investing on EVs, because children that are educated are children that will know what to do in the case of a drought or a flood or any natural disaster.
la cifra era como el
I think
2.3
it was
que afectaba a la
2.3,
del país
the
y a su
number,
economía.
and that they
Y
contributed
al mismo
to
tiempo,
the
estas mismas
economy
familias que
moving
van a
forward.
escoger tener menos hijos
And
decisiones
these
más responsables
children will
respecto al medio
make more
ambiente.
responsible
Entonces,
solutions for their
para tenerlas,
environment
una de las claves es
and when having
eduquemos a
children,
los niños.
etc. So
Y si
let's
bien en Chile la
teach young
escolarización es
girls. In
obligatoria hasta cuarto
Chile,
medio,
schooling is
por ejemplo, yo
mandatory
soy criada, soy
until
madre
12th
joven, tengo
grade. I
27.
am a young mother. I have a
La
son of
deserción
3,
universitaria de
and
madres es del
school
65%.
dropout is
Y en las escuelas de
65%
Chile,
among the
los
youth,
niños
and
que
in
son
school
adolescentes
is
que
even
son madres
higher.
en el colegio,
Teenage
la mayoría no
moms
llega a la
in school,
universidad.
most of
Y
them
en la
do not
universidad el
reach higher
65%
education, and
abandona los estudios
65%
porque, por ejemplo, en
drop out
Chile
of
solo tenemos
high
dos
school. And in
universidades que
Chile,
tienen
we have
jardines,
2
la Universidad
universities
Católica y la Universidad de Chile.
with the kindergarten
Entonces, tú tienes
involved with
situaciones
the
bien
nursery. So
complejas.
in
Y lo
Chile,
que
you
más
have these
preocupa
complex
aquí es que por cada
situations,
año de
and
escolarización
studies
son
prove
más
that
fuertes
per
las
year of
pérdidas, son
schooling,
mujeres más
they contribute to the
resilientes.
economy. They are
Entonces,
more
bueno,
resilient. So what is the
aquí lo que hay que
target?
saber es que
What is the
también
goal? What we must
en el
know is
territorio nacional,
that
por ejemplo,
in
con respecto
national
a la necesidad de
territory,
energía corta,
based on
no
fair
se nos
energy
consulta.
transition, we are not
Yo
consulted.
soy,
We are not
hoy
asked
día vivo en
about our
Santiago, por
opinion.
cierto, Valparaíso, igual es
I
mi
am
compañera,
from
y
Valparaíso
allá
as
las
my
niñas y mujeres rurales que
partners
son las que
here, and
sufren
most of the
la mayoría de los
rural
efectos del cambio
young
climático como los
girls
incendios
there and
forestales,
women who live
no se les
wildfires
consulta los
and
proyectos en
other
sus
natural
territorios,
disasters are not
no
consulted
pasan por
about
ellas y ellas son las
projects
principales
in their
afectadas.
territories, and they're
Cuando, por
the main
ejemplo, por la
affected
erosión del suelo
parties.
de una actividad
The
forestal
soil
poco
erosion
regulada,
by
que nos afecta en la agricultura, que nos quema sin
misconducted
comida, que necesitan
deforesting
inundaciones por esa erosión
activities
o a incendios
are
forestales,
affecting
son las
these
mujeres y las niñas. Eso es
children,
por lo que
women, and young
fallecen. Por
girls
tanto,
who
uno
are
de
the
los
first to die
temas que quiero
because
dejar sobre la
of
mesa es que tenemos que ser parte de
this
esa mesa cuando se armen los proyectos, que tenemos que ser
erosion
parte
of the
consultiva.
soil.
El
And
80% de los defensores
the
ambientales en Chile
80%
son mujeres.
of
¿Y por qué es esta razón?
defenders
Porque nosotras
are
somos
women in
quienes
Chile
viven los efectos del cambio
because we are the
climático,
ones
cuando falta
living
el
the effects
agua,
of
o cuando
climate
nos falta
change.
el agua, cuando falta
When
la
there's
energía
drought,
o
when
cuando hay un
there's
desastre,
contamination of the
somos las
water, or
primeras.
when there are any disasters, we are the
Entonces,
first
si
victims.
quieren
So if
proyectos de
you
transición
want
justa y exitosos, tienen que incluir a
per
las niñas y a las
energy
mujeres.
transition
No
projects,
solo
you
porque
must
si
include
ellas
women
están más
first.
preparadas, por ejemplo,
Not
ante un
only because
desastre, una
if
inundación,
women are
van
more
a actuar
prepared in
antes de
case
que
of a
ocurra el
flood
desastre,
or anything
sino
else,
que
they will
también
know what to do
pueden ser,
before the
sus sugerencias
disaster
pueden ser muy
happens,
valiosas sobre la
but
mesa para
because their
saber cómo
suggestions can be very
participar, cómo
valuable
incluirlos,
on the
cómo
table
avanzar hacia
to
la
know how
adaptación.
to include their
Si bien
territories
Chile
and know what
es
to do.
uno de los países que menos
Chile
gases de
is
efecto
one of the
invernadero
countries
emite,
that
por ejemplo, en
least
contraposición con Estados
emits
Unidos, somos uno
greenhouse
de los 20
gases
países
in
más
comparison
vulnerables a los
to the United
efectos
States,
por
let's
bajo
say,
los
but
distintos
we
climas
are
de norte a sur,
most
y
affected
eso nos deja en una situación
because
bastante
of the currents and the
desfavorable
weather
frente a
and the
otros países.
climate, and that makes
Yo creo
us
que lo que hay que avanzar finalmente es
unfavorably impacted by
la
climate
población de las niñas y los
crisis.
sectores
So we
vulnerables, es
must
algo que hay que
focus
promover en
on
todo el continente.
women
Chile
and
tiene una
young
muy buena y alta
children,
tasa de
young
escolarización,
girls,
no si tanto de la universidad,
schooling,
pero sí mejor que la del
education.
resto de Latinoamérica.
We have a
Y, por
better rate of
ejemplo,
schooling
yo
than the
en
rest of
conferencias
Latin America. That is
internacionales
true. In
con Ismael
international
hemos trabajado al
conferences
respecto, por ejemplo, con
with
Perú, con Bolivia, con
with
Brasil
Ismaela, we have been
y
in Peru, in
en Colombia,
Brazil, in
y muchas de
Colombia, in
nuestras
other
amigas
conferences,
acaban de
and many
casar
of
a
our
los 15
friends
años.
were married at
Entonces,
15.
15, 16 años
Our female
tenían
friends
ya a la
at
edad de
15
tener
or
2 o 3
16,
hijos
they
y
already
no terminar
had
sus
2 or 3
estudios.
children and they
Eso no,
couldn't finish
no
their
solo afecta a la
studies.
economía del país,
That
sino
not
que también
only
decide
affects the
cuáles son
country's
esas fuerzas
economy,
que
but
hacer.
affects
Yo, aparte de
the
ser de tremenda, soy
decisions in case
directora de
of
una empresa
disasters. I am
de
now director of a
reducción de riesgo de
company
eventos de
of
desastres naturales
reduction
en incendios e
to
inundaciones. Ese es mi área de
vulnerability
trabajo
to
con niñas y
floods
mujeres y por otro lado con
and
inteligencia
fires,
artificial
and I
haciendo
work with
modelados.
international
Y
with
una de las cosas que más
artificial
vemos es
intelligence
esto,
modeling
que mientras
also.
las
And one
niñas
of the
se
things
quedan
that
en
we
la
focus on
casa
is this:
no son
while
capacitadas,
children
cuando van los
stay at
gobiernos y
home,
hacen
they're not
decretos
trained.
o
When
hacen,
the
por ejemplo,
government goes
políticas agrarias
and
donde sirvan al
does
sector primario y agrícola,
agricultural
llaman a los hombres.
policies and forestry
O
policies
si
and
llaman a las niñas,
activities,
igualmente van los hombres, porque ¿con
their
quién dejan
call
a las
is
niñas?
to men.
Entonces también hay que
And
considerar ese tipo de espacios.
they need to
Hace
consider
muy
this sort
poquito
of
también
instances as
pasó, yo
well.
soy consejera del Ministerio
This
de Relaciones
happened
Exteriores y la
not
Educación,
long
y uno de
ago.
los
I'm
grandes
also a
objetos paz y
counselor
seguridad.
for
Resolución
the one of the
1325 del Acuerdo de Beijing.
ministries,
¿Y qué
and
podíamos ver
as
ahí?
part of
Que en
the
la mesa de mujeres de cambio
1325
climático,
of
la
Beijing
mayoría de los
Agreement,
asistentes éramos
what
mujeres, no
happens?
habían hombres, por ejemplo, primer tema.
We we didn't have any men on the table or around the table in the decisions. Many of us could not attend though because this was working hours. I was caring for my son. we need to be more included, and young girls' education is even more effective than investing on EV. So we need to be around decision-making tables, and we need to support not only around gender or transparency, but we can support, we can contribute around sustainability and children, young girls and women, and they know more about the territories than any satellite. So when you want to do modeling, they know when wildfires move, where wildfires can move, or what are the places where wind moves. They can be a huge contribution around the tables.
That answer alone, and I will tell you, I often get the question from people, what is the most difficult part of being the U.S. ambassador in Chile? I have a 5-year-old daughter, and my husband travels quite frequently, and I say the hardest part about being the ambassador to Chile is being a mother at the same time. And so it is so important that those of us who have the opportunity and the privilege create space and ensure that we are not leaving out people who have these amazing ideas and these amazing actions to contribute, because we are also oftentimes looked at as the caretakers, or because we have these other responsibilities. And so I appreciate that perspective, and I thank you for all that you are doing, balancing everything that you have on your plate as well. So thank you very much for that. My next question is for Sebastián. You founded Escazú Ahora in 2020 with the goal of getting Chile to join the agreement. Congratulations. And were selected by ECLAC as one of the agreement's 5 youth champions, which is extraordinary. When you succeeded in getting Chile to join the agreement in 2022, you shifted your focus to advancing initiatives that support Chile's full compliance with the agreement. The agreement has, I think we can all agree at times, had trouble gaining support from parts of the private sector. And so my question for you is, as we think about this whole of ecosystem approach to combating climate change and taking climate action, what would you say to companies that want to be part of the solution but are concerned that significant climate regulation may make it impossible for them to sustain their business?
Thank you so much for your question. My English is very bad, so I speak Spanish.
Voy a hablar en español.
Creo que es tremendamente
I believe
bueno que el gobierno de
that
Chile
it is
haya
great
escuchado a la
that the
sociedad
government of
civil,
Chile
haya
has
firmado
listened
el
to the
acuerdo
civil
perfecto
society and
y el
has
Congreso luego
signed the
lo haya
Escazú
ratificado
agreement,
con
and
una
then the
amplia
Congress
mayoría,
has ratified
demostrando
it
que
with
este es un tema que trasciende directamente a
more
todos los colores
information. This
políticos y
is
que el cuidado del medio
goes
ambiente
beyond
es
any
una cuestión
political
que nos
color,
incumbe a
or
todos.
this is a
Nos
subject
incumbe a
that
todos
is for
honestamente,
everybody,
a
and it
todos
is for
porque
everybody,
permitimos
not
no
only the
solamente
political
a toda la sociedad
parties,
civil, sino
but
que
in
también
civil
justamente
society, but
al sector
also
empresarial, que
the
finalmente es quien
entrepreneur
tiene que
sector that
cumplir
is
las
the one that
regulaciones que
has to
establece,
comply
por
with the
ejemplo,
regulations
el
that are
Acuerdo de
established
Escazú y todas las formas
in
normativas
the
que tenemos
Escazú
también
agreement, and
en
all of
materia
the
ambiental.
policies and
Y
norms
creo que
that
ahí
we
tenemos
have
todavía
regarding
un
the
gran
environment.
desafío,
And there we
porque
have
si
a
bien
huge
el
challenge,
Acuerdo de
because
Escazú y
although
las
the
normativas chilenas
Escazú
establecen
agreement and the
estándares que son
Chilean
bastante
policies
elevados,
has
son
high
estándares pensados
standards
de un
that
país
will make us think
bastante
that Chile
preocupado por
is
el cuidado ambiental,
a country
en la
that is
práctica
concerned with the
vemos que falta
environment. In
mucho para que
practice,
esa
we see
regulación
that many
se
things are
implemente
missing for this
actualmente.
regulation to be
Tenemos muchos
implemented.
casos de empresas
We have many
nacionales
cases
y
of
también empresas
national
extranjeras
businesses
que hoy
and
día están
foreign
apelando
businesses that are not
directamente la
violating
regulación nacional
the
a cambio de
national
lograr recibir
regulations and norms,
retribuciones muy bajas,
and
por
they
ejemplo,
receive
denulas en casos
fines that are
de corrupción.
low.
Y
That's
en
why
cuanto
they
al acuerdo
don't
de Escazú,
follow the rules and the
creemos
norms.
nosotros que
And
falta
we
muchísimo
believe
para que
that
ese
there's a lot
acuerdo, que
of
esas promesas
still
tan buenas
missing
se
for
puedan
them
implementar
to
en la
comply with these
práctica y logren
promises, to be able to
finalmente
implement
los
within
territorios.
practice, and
Hablaba
to
recientemente
for this
el subsecretario, ¿cierto?, de
agreement
Estados
to
Unidos
reach
respecto de lo
different
importante que
areas.
es
And I was
hacer estas
thinking,
promesas
I
con
was
todo el
talking of
proceso que tiene
to
que ver con la
involve
minería, ¿no es cierto? Hablaba de
people. We
informar
were talking
respecto
about
de
mining, to be
las
able to
cosas buenas que
inform
podría traer
the
la
good
minería
things
hacia
that
ellos.
mining
Y ahí
sector
cambio la
could
palabra.
bring.
Creo que la palabra no es
I
informar,
think
la
the
palabra
word
es
is not to
comunicar.
inform,
Y hay
it's
un cambio muy
communicate.
grande ahí,
There's a
porque
huge
informar
change
es
between
una
one and the other.
cuestión
Informing
unidireccional.
is
Yo
just
tengo
one
información, se
directional.
la entrego a otro.
You know,
Lo que hace falta acá y lo que establece
and
el acuerdo de Escazú
what we
es que
need
tenemos que
for
avanzar
the
hacia la
Escazú agreement is that
comunicación,
we need to
donde
advance
sea
towards
información
communication, where we
objetiva,
have
¿no
a
es cierto?
bilateral
Donde yo
communication,
como
right?
empresario, por
As an
ejemplo, pueda
entrepreneur,
hacer llegar
I can
obviamente los beneficios de mi proyecto
tell
a
the
las
benefits of
comunidades que
my
están
projects
alrededor,
to
pero
the
que también
communities
pueda
that are
escuchar
there, and for them also, and
ideas
also
de
for
la
me to
comunidad
listen what are
respecto
the
a ese
ideas of the
tipo de
communities
procesos.
And I
regarding
have a
this
question
project.
there.
Y
Do
tengo
you
una
feel like
pregunta ahí
that
también.
dialogue
¿Sientes que
exists?
sí?
Yo creo que
Oh,
actualmente no
I believe
existe,
that right now this
lamentablemente.
dialogue
Hoy
does not
día
exist,
existe
unfortunately.
obviamente a través de la
Right
regulación
now,
nacional la
through
obligación
national
de todas
regulations,
las
we have
empresas
the
de comunicar
obligation
lo que
of the
hacen
enterprises to
con sus
communicate what is
proyectos,
going
de
on with their
involucrar a la
projects,
comunidad.
to involve communities. But in practice, this is just a checklist, right? The business just
Y tenemos
complied with
casos súper graves. Hoy
their
día
checklist. And
Chile
we have several cases that
es
are
uno de los más afectados
very
por el
important.
tema del
Chile
cambio
is one
climático,
of the most
pero también
affected
es
countries because of climate
extremadamente
change, but it's
desigual
also
en lo
a
social,
very
en lo económico, pero también
unequal
en lo
country in
ambiental.
social,
Tenemos muchas
economical, and
zonas de sacrificio,
environmentally
es decir,
speaking. So we have
lugares
very
específicos del
many
país que han sido
sacrifices
destinados
zones.
al
There
sacrificio
are
humano y
areas in the
necesitamos
country that are
experiencia
sacrifice
para
zones,
incluso
10,
ver las
15, or
empresas
even
contaminantes
30
liberando gas
businesses that are
espontáneo y están
contaminating and are
matando a la
working
población por
simultaneously and
estar
are
haciendo eso.
killing
Hay
the
enfermedades
population with
también que luego no
cancer.
se pueden revertir.
And
Y, por ejemplo, hablando de hidrógeno verde,
when we talk
nosotros
about
tenemos
green
regiones temáticas
hydrogen,
en
we have
Valparaíso,
an
en la
emblematic
zona
action in
costera de
Valparaiso,
Valparaíso, donde hay
which
más
is
de
the
20
area
empresas
of
contaminantes
Quintero
operando de manera
Bochucaví, more than
simultánea, donde
20
tenemos
enterprises working,
intoxicaciones
companies
masivas de
working,
niños, niños y
contaminating
adolescentes,
intoxication that
hablando
are
de
massive for
100,
children and
200,
women,
300
talking
niños
about 200,
intoxicados en
300 children that
hospitales
are
que son
intoxicated
muy
in the
pequeños, que no
hospital
tienen
that
la
are small,
capacidad,
that don't
y en
have the
ese lugar
capacity.
ya está tremendamente
Small
contaminado,
hospitals, and
está
this place is
declarado como una zona
contaminated
saturada
and is
legalmente,
declared as
se
a
quiere instalar, por
saturated
ejemplo, una
area
planta de
zone, a
hidrógeno verde.
sacrifice zone,
Yo
and
creo
we
que no
want they want
corresponde.
to
O sea,
install a
deberíamos
green
buscar un lugar
hydrogen plant. I don't
mejor,
think
más
that's
adecuado
correct.
para
We
ello,
could look
porque
for another
aseguro
place
que
that is more
probablemente la
adequate for
comunidad
this
de
plant
Puncaví,
because I
primero, no
bet
sabe que
you
ese es el
that the
plan que
community
está
of
ahí, y
Puchucaví, they
segundo,
don't know
tampoco
about this
está de acuerdo que
project,
se
and
instale
second of
otra
all, they
empresa
will not
más
agree
que pueda
for
poner
another
en
company
peligro la
to
salud
be
de
there
los niños
and
que
put
finalmente
at
están
risk
muriendo
the
de
health of
cáncer
their
con
children that are
pulmones
already
enfermos y
dying
pulmones
of
inserebrados
cancer,
producto de la contaminación.
of
Tenemos que avanzar hacia ese
because of the
diálogo, porque
contamination.
efectivamente
So we need to advance
desarrollo,
in the
medio
dialogue.
ambiente son cosas que
We
pueden ir de
need
la mano,
to
pero para
know,
ello el diálogo, la
for us, it
comunicación
may
es
be we
fundamentalmente
can
clave.
understand why to put a plant there, but for
You're
them,
exactly
they
right,
won't
of
understand.
course, and I think one of the keys is convincing businesses and bringing them on board as partners, right? And so making it not a check the box exercise, as you said, but encouraging and educating and creating this engagement so they understand that creating climate action is actually good for their business, right? If we don't have a planet, it doesn't matter what your profits are, and it's urgent that we take action now. So thank you for the work that you're doing on that. So we've talked a lot about how we need a collective solution involving every sector of society. Ismaela, this is one of your areas of expertise. In addition to your work at 1.5, you are a coordinator at Climatech Chile, which works with technology-based companies to identify technological solutions to combating climate change. And as a coordinator of the Water Security Pact Chile. You're very busy, which seeks to improve water management in the private sector. As we have touched on a bit, there is sometimes, I think, a distrust between different sectors when it comes to climate change and what the advantages or disadvantages are as engaging. So when you have different sectors, civil society, government, private sector, that don't trust each other's motives, but understand that in the long term, climate change will negatively affect all of us. What have you observed are the best ways to overcome distrust and find a path forward to address what should be a common goal?
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador.
Muchas
Thank you so much
gracias
for the invitation.
por la invitación,
Also going to
embajadora.
speak in Spanish.
Voy a hablar también en español.
Bueno, la verdad es que es una
The
pregunta
truth
bastante
is that
compleja
this
la
is
que
a
me
very
haces.
complex
Yo creo
question you
que
just
todavía no encontramos
made.
una
I don't
respuesta
think
certera,
we have a
pero
correct answer
claro,
or a definite
afortunadamente gracias
answer.
a la experiencia que he podido
But
tener, he
from my
podido compartir
experience,
con diversos
and
sectores, desde
I
la
have been
sociedad
able to
civil,
share with different
desde el
areas
sector
of the civil
privado, desde el
society, of
sector
the
público.
public
Bueno,
and private
creo
sector.
que
So
desde
I
la
believe
sociedad civil,
that
por
from
donde
civil
me siento
society
un poco
is
más
where I feel a
identificada
little bit
por
more
la
identified
organización
with
donde soy cofundadora,
because
que
of
es
the organization
1.5.
where I'm co-founder,
Creo
which
que
is
hay algo
1.5,
sumamente relevante que
1.5. I
lo
think there's something
comentaba
that is
Isis,
very
lo
relevant
comentaba
that
Seba
Isis was
y
commenting
también
and
lo
Seba
comenta
also,
el
and
IPCC en
the
su último reporte, en
IPCC
el
would
Special
also
Issue.
comment in their
Si no
last
lo han visto
studies
aún,
in the
les
special
recomiendo
issue. If you
verlo. Hay
haven't
una
checked it
página
out yet,
sumamente
there is a
interesante
very
donde muestra un
interesting
gráfico
page
que
where
mientras
there's a
más
graph that is
joven
shown
eres,
that
peor van a ser las
tells that
consecuencias del cambio climático que te
the
van a tocar vivir.
younger you are, the
Cuando las
worse you
personas
will live
tengan
in
80
the
años,
consequences of the
van a
climate
vivir en un
change.
planeta totalmente
So
diferente al que yo
kids
viva
that
cuando
will
tengo
be
80
50,
años.
60, or will have will live a different
Entonces,
world than
desde la
I will
sociedad
live.
civil y también desde
From
la
the civil
juventud,
society and from
tenemos
the
un
youth
sentido de
point of view, we
alerta
have an
sumamente
alert
importante porque entendemos
sense
que
that is
nuestro
very
futuro
important
está
because we
siendo
understand that
derrotado
is
como
our
se lo dijo en
future,
algún
what is
momento.
at stake.
Entonces, en ese
This
sentido,
has been mentioned at
siempre
some
estamos
point today.
buscando
So we are always looking to
elevar la
elevate
visión de los
ambition,
compromisos, de
the
las
ambition
acciones,
of
de las metas que
commitments,
se
of
están
actions,
tomando,
of the objectives
porque
that we
entendemos que
are
mientras más
tackling,
ambiciosos
because we
seamos,
understand that
mientras más
the more ambitious
acciones
we are, the
concretas,
more concrete
relevantes
actions and
tomemos,
relevant
el
actions
futuro que nos
we
espera va a
can
ser
achieve,
un
the
poco
future
mejor
that
que
we
el
are
al que vamos encaminados
hoping
ahora.
for is
Y
a
de hecho
little bit
también
better
me
than the ones
gustaban las
that the
palabras
one that we're
de
having
amiga
that we're
con el
looking
costo
at
de
right now,
inacción.
and the
Sabemos que en
also
estos momentos
cost
no
of non-action. the consequences of non-action is higher than the cost of beginning to act now. That's why from the civil society we promote action, and we feel this feeling of, oh, the social civil society is already pushing forward and pressing, and it is because we understand this urgency, and maybe the people that are younger, we can see the alert in it. So this is why it is relevant for different areas to be able to have communication, because we all have a very important role. I don't think one is more relevant than the other, but I think it is very important for us to listen to each other, to sit, to not put only young people to comply with a certain quote or certain expectation, because people from civil society can also hand in a vision that can add to the discussion. And because every time that we get together to look for a solution of for any problem, and we get together with people that think the same way than us, that we're always going to say yes to us, we're not going to gain anything. We need to accept different point of views to have these uncomfortable conversations, these conversations that will make us see that we can sitting there to be able to communicate and advance towards the same objective, which is climate action. And it is interesting for us to understand, to have these uncomfortable conversations. And on the other hand, although we are implementing different areas where we are getting the civil society involved, we need to have spaces where they can actually engage. Let's not just stay there and complete with the quota and just add people because they're young. Let's get them involved. Add the people, get them involved, the people that are there sitting. Although, as civil society, we need to empower ourselves in the different areas in which we're participating, that we also see a challenge to be able to get involved in other areas, from the academy, from the private and public sector, to be able to accept the civil society and the other areas as relevant entities in this conversation. I think this is something that we can work with, accept ourselves, not be best friends, maybe. It is not necessary for us to end each conversation partying and hugging each other, but to accept that we can have a fructiferous conversation
It
and
sounds a lot like the
contribute
work of
towards
diplomacy,
the
actually.
objective.
Sometimes we don't always have to be
Parece.
friends, but we work towards common goals, and we have common challenges, so thank you for that. In the spirit of Sebastian's comments about not just passing information on and making it engaging and part of a dialogue and a discussion, I'd like to open it up to the audience to see if there are questions from anyone in the audience for any of our three experts here. I certainly have a long list of questions, but I'm hoping that there are folks in the audience who want to engage as well. I'm putting people on the spot.
Don't be shy.
Anyone? Please.
Voy a empezar. Sí, de hecho hemos tenido varias
Actually, we have had several uncomfortable experiences. For example,
Sebastián y yo,
Sebastian and I,
llevamos 4 o 5 años o más
we have been working for 4 or 5 years to be able to achieve the Escazú agreement as part of the civil society. This included several conversations with people that we don't actually get along, or they didn't agree with our requirements. Sebastian had to negotiate directly with the parliament in Valparaiso, and I had to negotiate with a few parties here in Santiago, insisting in what are the benefits of the agreement according to their political sector, and according to the agreement in Chile, what was the benefits of it. And I think Sebastian is going to comment about it. And this was one of the situations where we agreed the agreement, and it was in the parliament, and we saw that it was an effort, simultaneous effort from the left toward until the right party, and I think it was amazing. We saw that this was possible, communication is possible, and us being young was not a barrier if we had the tools to work with. And other uncomfortable spaces were negotiations, for example. I have participated in COP25, virtually speaking, but I also participated in COP26 to COP27, and we're going with Ismail to COP28 physically. And in there are some businesses, companies, and young people that have companies and ask us with our opinion. And this conversation goes in critical spaces. For example, when we talk about green hydrogen, there's a lot of tense situations there because as young people, Latin Americans, we are worried that what happened with the copper mining doesn't happen again. There are huge communities in the north of Chile. Santoni is one of the people we know in Chanavallita, in the north of Iquique. There, the fatality rate or mortality rate is because of cancer, lung cancer, because of the pollution, because of the quantity of industries that are there. And we want to work together. Yes, we need a green hydrogen and lithium, but we also need them to be responsible with the people, with the communities, and the money that comes out from these operations can be invested and reinvested in the territory as well. And more professionals to come from Chile for hydrogen and lithium, and not only bringing talent from outside. Is we want to advance, we need to advance in all of these areas, this dialogue to be able to advance. For example, we just signed with the European Union in hydrogen and lithium, green hydrogen and lithium, and this is what we need to create national capacity professionals for green hydrogen and lithium. Not long ago, we were in Belgium, and I went to the summit of ECLAC to be able to put what were the needs of the young people, and one of the points that were important, and the presidents were able to tackle it, was that the environmental standards of the projects that benefit the European Union in Chile will be applied, because the environmental standards in Chile regarding materials and gases are very low. So if we really want this to adjust with the territory, we need to bring them up, and this was one of the main dialogues. And second, if they want to install themselves in the territory, please first talk with the people, because this will happen. That we are going to go there with your company. We will have resistance, and we are traumatized because there were decisions that were made not taking into account the people, the communities. But if we sit on a table and we have dialogue, and both of us can see each other's point of view, and we have talked about this in international scenarios, and I say, what do you think about this project? I'm worried about this or that, and the company can solve it. How do we see, for example, if there's a lack of education, if the environmental impact is maybe too high, maybe tone it down and move the company a little bit so so civil society is not there. Like what happens with the sacrifice zone, there's 5 industries with people living there right next to it. Put an industrialized zone, but not having families living there. And we thought about this and we said, this can be done. Maybe have a little bit more of a balance between the community and the companies. And these are the uncomfortable dialogues that lead us to more fructiferous conversations. And Chile is a small country, but it has led the negotiations of the climate summit. And there are countries like, for example, India or South Africa that want to advance in decarbonization. And we need to show the consequences of this, and how are we going to advance faster. Chile at least understood its path. We are one of the few countries that have a long-term planification for 2050, and this conversation was not free. It was done because of pressure. We pressure, and we're always called upon this, but we always need to pressure to aspire for more, because we're always going to be given less, and we need to be part of this table. These are uncomfortable dialogues. We're the ones that have brought us to the best negotiations and best results. We had advanced in the Escazú, for example, summit. There were 100,000 people protesting outside, and this generated pressure to be able to advance a lot in terms of negotiation. This is how we work. This is part of society, and as part of the affected group, for example, myself as a mother, a young mother, Latin American woman, I'm part of the most vulnerable group that will be affected by climate change, because if we have different conditions, like for example poverty, etc., I would just like to highlight this. Please include us. Include us as a fundamental part of entrepreneur policy or any policy necessary for for the action against climate.
I would like to tell you about a personal experience. Not long ago, I had the chance to participate in the IUCL Leaders Forum in Switzerland, and I had the chance of meeting managers of the sustainability department of Anglo American. And as you know, Anglo American suffered a rather controversial situation in Los Bronces. And well, took that chance to ask them about this. And they are very, well, they are very interiorized in this social nature of the projects. They understand the relevance of the projects for the people, not only for the future of the company, but because they understand they must be aligned with the community's development and the community's progress. So they know. Probably that discussion is not yet made visible. There's work to be done yet, but the corporate offices are more open now to dialogue. I don't know if to have the most awkward conversations or the most uncomfortable conversations, but they accept that the work needs to be done to recognize that reality. And I think that is where we're moving forward in the hydrological security pact. That is another work that I'm doing. And we're talking to companies about the challenges in terms of water security and the challenges that they're still facing in that regard. So dialogue is being held, and sometimes we need more cooperation and coordination spaces because sometimes it's just mining companies together about mining challenges. And when there's water in a basin, it's not only about mining companies operating. It's different industries, and they also need to talk to the community that is living off of that water. And they are moving forward. Obviously, we would love it to be more agile, but of course, it can be perfected. There's progress. So I'm still hopeful about the coordination between the different parts. I would like to add that in my experience as Escazú, from day one, we started with our campaign to make Chile part of the Escazú agreement, and we challenge ourselves to overcome the barriers, but with our colleagues in with our partners in this fight, but coordinate with different stakeholders to approach different human rights defenders and the academia and the political sphere. To me, it was a very enriching process, having discussions with different sectors. I could personally meet with different sectors from with the political Republican Party and the Communist Party, so both ends of the spectrum. And the discussions, of course, are different. There's different perspectives, takes on the matter are different, but that is enriching as well because in dialogue you learn to understand and listen to others and understand their proposals and the differences and the different concerns. And through this honest dialogue, allowing for joint reflection, I think it's possible to solve our complications, which is what happened in Congress. I think without dialogues, the Escazú would not have been ratified without the support from the extreme left to extreme or to far right politicians. So I think personally, I haven't had the experience of talking with the private world representatives, but I think we need more cooperation instances to look at each other's perspective. Both parties inhabiting the same territory, we want the same things with intrinsic benefits for both parties. I think we should be talking and reflecting more in more instances around this. One last thing. As Ismaela, I belong to the private world, but I come from the startup world. And I believe that today we see an urgent need not only from the civil society and companies, but also the youth meeting with companies because they need solutions to achieve this fair transition, to achieve carbon neutrality and sustainability. In my case, for instance, as a climate tech company, that enriching dialogue, finding investors and finding about your problems. I may have the solution, but today there's many young people and all of us at COP, let's say, all of us as companies with some solutions for climate change are gathering 200 young people, all of us moving forward in climate change from our areas. And I come from the world of resilience to disasters. Others are moving forward in waste, others are advancing in water. But we do need to talk about the pains of the private world, and we may have solutions. You can help us invest and create powerful partnerships. We need to promote that from school to make it viable, to make it feasible. We need many solutions that today do not exist yet. That reminds me of the Polo program in the United States that came from the innovation of the state where the government paid for many solutions. I think that is one of the best examples where the state or companies invest and they say, I have all of these problems. See if any of you has the solutions or if we can gather and think of solutions. I think that that would be very useful and where the youth can participate and be
I
validated
think
to
we have
continue
time
growing.
probably for
Muchas
one
gracias.
more
Creo que
short
tenemos
question. Over here, yes.
Chile. In schools, they're not teaching about this. There are no educational plans from the ministry around this. So, two things. In your experience, what do you think we lack in terms of education? And the other question is, how do you foresee, how can you foresee the impact would be of, in a more educated society? Educated about education and maybe if we're more aware of our consumption patterns and even not littering. What do you think
And I
would
would
be
say
the
I
impact?
saw a lot of questions, so if we can be very brief, we might be able to get one more question in as well.
Recibir otra pregunta más. Great. As you mentioned, I am the creator of Plan B, an environmental school program. I started to create that at 15 and implemented that at 17 in Liceo Providencia in 2019. With the social upheaval in Chile, we stopped that, but in environmental education, we wanted a circular approach where we grow our own food that went to the cafeterias, then composting. We wanted to collect the water and maybe irrigate the plants. And we want to approach the different crises. We have suicide at rates from 15 to 20, and the second or the highest is cancer. So we have to think about environmental education to lower those death rates. And we need to understand that children are not the ones who purchase things. They're not the ones generating those consumption patterns. Are adults the ones. So I'm teaching them how to grow plants, and I'm still consulting in schools. But the children have a changed mentality, have a different mindset. They know that growing their garden is helpful. The Chile has an environmental education almost by osmosis. So the problem starts after sixth grade. That is when things change because they started to get prepared for war, for competition. We're competing with our classmates for future, and everything breaks. Now uh, different uh, those different high school trips that we used to take are lost almost, and we want to do that from the Ministry of Education. Today we have these contents that are from the national curriculum, but we need, and we are doing that as Tremendas Foundation. We want to modify the national law to have different aims, different goals to target the different goals, well, to target what we want. But if we are going to have more wildfires, more heat waves, and more impact, we'll need more preparedness tools, not only about the protocols, but what to do in reality when we're facing a drought, depending on the natural habitats, how to grow in your own home, because vegetables are going to be more expensive due to the lack of water. So the mitigation tools and the resilience tools need to be included. As a Plan B in Tremendas, we do that. We see in what part of the curriculum, what subject can this be included. In statistics, for instance, instead of just addressing abstract numbers, we can show the temperature or the temperature of the world, or music, creating instruments with reused materials. So from every area you can address this. Now the thing is, you need to set up concrete indicators, because this will be key, and you need these new indicators. You have the next years to continue advancing in the ambitions of climate change education to prepare the future generations. I would like to tell you about my own personal experience again. At 1.5, we also have talks, give talks in terms of environmental education. I've always been scared to teach the youngest because I used to be afraid of traumatizing them. We know they're like little sponges, and if we tell them in 10 more years you won't have woods or forests, they will take it to heart. And I'm not an educator by profession, so I'm afraid of leaving them traumatized. So I have evaded that. I have eluded that part of that educational part. And I visited Target Foundation, where they have a program for environment for the youngest between 7 to 11 years old, and I was able to join them in one of their sessions, and I talked to them about this fear that I had of teaching the youngest children, and they said they're very clear about this problem that we're living. They know about climate crisis, they understand this issue, so we don't need to make them more aware of climate crisis. We need to give them the tools. What can they do? We can skip the raising awareness phase. We can just give them the tools. We need to maybe raise awareness among the parents so that they support their children when they want to implement new actions in terms of climate action. But on the other hand, what it means to have a more educated society about environment, I would say when we're entering an institution or when we want to implement a project, it needs to be environmentally feasible. We not only need to look for economic feasibility, but social feasibility and environmental feasibility, all of it for sustainable development, which is what we're aiming for. That is relevant to work with among the youth, the children. Fundación Mustaki works in Recoleta, so they have a certain population to target, but we want to target everyone in the country. So the 7-year-olds, when they're 27 and they're entering the job world, and they should know that decisions are not only made thinking of money, but thinking about people and the planet. Great. I fully agree with you and what Isis just said, but I would like to add something very briefly and specific. I think we need to move towards a comprehensive environmental education, not only aiming to care for water and composting and recycling, but that is what we that it's about tools. What is which is what we're fighting for at Escazú, right? And legal tools to protect nature. I cannot defend them if I don't know the rights to inform, to have access to justice. I think we should be more aware about rights, and that should be more incorporated. Several NGOs are working to
I
teach
saw a
children
hand
about
in
their
the back.
rights.
Yes, please. And we'll have respuestas muy breves, por favor.
I wanted to congratulate all of you. I think it's shocking and tremendously enlightening to have you here thinking that you're here today and thinking that you'll be tomorrow helping us in these urgent matters. Now, considering where we're standing, Latin America, as it was mentioned a while ago, Latin America possesses important parts of the materials that are necessary for the energy transition, which is one of the components. We have lithium for renewable energies. We are a key component to provide the supplies to articulate the first world economies, but we are very unequal in our continent. We accumulate most of the deaths because of environmental reasons. So we have huge biodiversity. We provide oxygen, soil, food to the entire planet. And we also have in our region common things. We have companies that are throughout the region. We have more or less common language. We have agreements, economic agreements. So how do you use those to position from your perspective, a youth perspective, or a social perspective for a region? I truly believe there's a great potential in Latin America, and you are a key part of the chain. So, what is your experience? And again, congratulations. Thank you. I liked the question very much. And it actually addresses something that I wanted to discuss, and that is the protection of environmental activists. Latin America is the most dangerous region around the world to protect the environment. Many of these activists are threatened and murdered. Over two-thirds of these murders happen in our region, and Chile is not exempt from this reality. Unfortunately, we are seeing cases of threat, harassment, and deaths from multinationals that are present in our country. If we're talking about dialogue, we need to be honest and transparent without chasing your counterparts. I would say that the Escazú Agreement was precisely a good path towards a greater protection to these environmental activists. But we are not just standing aside, we're also working on inspecting to see if this agreement is being met in our country or not. And unfortunately, the 25th of October, we published, and we've realized that well, unfortunately, the government of Chile, after 1 year, has done nothing to protect the environmental activists, which is, of course, a very severe situation. If we consult several institutions, there's nothing put into practice. So we need to, of course, inspect, check, but we need to create institutions to protect the environmental activists that are now unprotected and facing this kind of threats. I will hold two discussions in the Senate tomorrow for a new bill of law for instances like this so that we can move towards a real protection of environmental activists in our region of Latin America and the Caribbean. I would like to address this question from the perspective of how we as a youth coordinate in Latin America. At 1.5 Foundation, we participate in the coordination, as I would love to say, in the most relevant summit of the youth and climate change of Latin America, known as RCOI. This RCOI was, well, it emerged as an event seeking to join the youth of Latin America on its way to the COP to give a statement, to give recommendations to decision makers. Obviously, we did not want this meeting to end after 3 days, once a year, but we wanted to set it up as a network. So I invite you to visit Arcoy Latam. The Caribbean has their own Arcoy, and we have a map with over 5,000 initiatives, with organizations working throughout Latin America. As the Latin American youth, we are coordinating, we are working, we're organizing, and we are strengthening the bonds more and more, understanding that we are a widely affected region by climate change, and we need to be in synchronicity. We need to be in sync and we need to be in coordination. We understand that we won't get far if we move on our own, so we are working together. A little over a month ago, we celebrated the ARCO in its third version, held in Colombia, and last year it was held in Costa Rica. The first version was online because of the pandemic, but we are every time gathering more and more young people, which of course makes us very proud as an organization because we know that it's not just a few of us, there are many of us, and those voices united are stronger now when it's about taking a stance. Tenemos una última respuesta antes del fin del panel. I would say hope. Hope is a key word for our generation, not only because we are creating changes and solutions and moving, of course, the scale, but when we are older, we'll have a generation. And I would say, well, as you were explaining with ARCO, we have realized that we can coordinate greatly. We can leave our differences aside, we can put them aside, and we, in 15 more years, will have a truly cooperative country. We'll be able to function as a bloc. We'll make decisions for the continent. If Chile has hydrogen and lithium, another partner has another material, we'll probably can make the changes that today are being stuck due to old policies. I see hope in terms of political renewal. I have hope. And we are creating the solutions for that. And the companies, of course, must invest in this exchange, in exchanges of young people, and help us promote the youth choosing these careers, these environmentally linked careers, because we need to move the needle in that direction. We need to press so that policies are created and bills are passed, and we have a greener focus because we'll be the leaders of tomorrow and we'll make this continent
thank you.
move.
Well, I will say every time I travel throughout Chile, I try to meet with young climate activists, whether they're working on humedales, cleaning los lagos limpios in the center of the country. And I have been amazed everywhere I go in Chile that climate action is not just seen as a top-down, a government-down approach. It is young people like each of you on this stage who are really taking the action that is driving this issue forward. And so I congratulate you, I thank you, and I ask everybody to join me in saying thank you for this wonderful panel today.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much for the panel, Emerging Leaders in Climate Action. Thank you, Sebastián, Isis, Ismaela, and of course our moderator, the Ambassador Mijan. Now we have a small coffee break for those that are here in person, and also for the audience which is through the virtual conference. We have a small coffee break, and we would ask you to be back at noon for the second part of the day. Thank you very much.
Never alone, was searching for a new home. Through cold doors, all our desires are withdrawn. Suddenly you're about to do the right thing, I'm sure. We long for it for so long, now the curtains are gone. galaxies kept within. Eruptions of silver beneath our skin.
space and money are folding. Win-win. Modern medicine. Win-win.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos
Good afternoon and welcome once again to the second panel of this conference of Wilson Center together with the Embassy of the United States about climate action and the transition and energy transition. Welcome to the people here present in GAM and also our online audience who are listening to us in English and Spanish. It is an honor to present this panel, the second one of today's conference, which is called The Future of Critical Minerals in South America. I would like to present the Undersecretary Jose Fernandez of the U.S. Department of State, Mr. Patricio Hidalgo, the CEO of Anglo American Chile, Mr. Ignacio Mejech, who is the VP of External Affairs, Latin America and Chile Country Manager, Mr. Nicolas Rivera, Vice President of Mining Resources, Development and Innovation for Codelco, Mr. Sebastian Miller, Country Economist for Chile of the Inter-American Development Bank, and our moderator, Mrs. Monica Rincon of CNN Chile. Thank you very much. Monica, the floor is yours. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. It is important for us to talk about economy, but also economy with a focus on sustainability and demystifying certain things, and also questioning ourselves on certain subjects. Like in Argentina, was covering the first turn, and they would say innovation needs an open mind, and innovation also needs to be open to conversation and analysis. We all know that in Chile and Latin America is Chile is in a very position of where we have different perspective with different countries, but we all agree that Latin America and Chile specifically have a very aware, alert position. And the panelists that are here with us today, I would like to ask them to do a general overview of their position regarding the importance that are given to all of these subjects and what is the position of Latin America. We have a specific question for each one of you later on. But first of all, an overview, about 3 or 4 minutes, where each of you can tell us from your own perspective what are the challenges for the world from Chile and Latin American perspective. We would like to give the floor to the Undersecretary. We'll start with you and we'll go advancing then. We have questions for each one of you later on. Thank you. I would think that I would be the last one since I'm the last one sitting here. Uh, but anyways, good morning. Why are we so interested in these critical materials? Because we are not going to achieve a climate transition without these materials. And because why did we have a need? Because we have a vulnerability. What do I mean by this? Like I said this morning, we will need quantities that are unimaginable of lithium, of magnesium, and cobalt to be able to achieve our objectives for the climate transition or climate change. In the last 5 years, it has tripled. The demand of lithium has tripled. Until 2050, you can multiply by 42 times. So we have an urgent need, and these critical materials are used for all of the equipments that we use today: computers, solar panels, vehicles, EVs, etc. We need it. And we also have vulnerability, and the vulnerability is that there are only a few countries that can comply with this demand, like we have learned with COVID, and like we learn every time there is a natural disaster, be it a hurricane or an earthquake. We cannot depend in only one, two, or three suppliers of any mineral. So we need to diversify our supply chain, and this is what we're trying to do between all of us here. And at the same time, this is an opportunity that is going to be hard to see it repeated. For Latin America, we have now the 50% of lithium, 40% of copper, and we need to take advantage of this opportunity in a sustainable way. It is a benefit for the community, for the countries, and for this not to only be as attraction that they bring it home and doesn't add value to this country where they extract it. So it is a need and also a vulnerability and also an opportunity. Excellent. Now we are going to give the floor to Sebastian. Thank you, Monica. I would like to only bring two numbers, which are historical numbers for the world. These two figures which the country hotter the best projection for a scenario where we reach 1.5 degrees, where in the year 2100 we will be back in 1.4. Today is around 1.2 or 1.1. We're still talking about 2/10 of a degree above what we have today. So this means a climate emergency. So if we don't do anything, it's even worse. This is one of the best case scenarios. So assuming that we're doing everything okay during these years, this will be the outcome. So this needs to happen. There's no way back. The climate transition needs to happen. We need more. We need to electrify a group of activities and diminish the emissions in others. And this is why these minerals are important. Without them, we cannot do it. This is a critical point. Therefore, it's a great opportunity, like this undersecretary says. I would not like to repeat everything he said, but for the region and Chile specifically, this is a great opportunity. But we have to do it the right way. It's not any mining company, it's not any process. We need communities. Yes, that's one of the strongest points that we need to bring together and attach it to the project. As the bank, we want to support all of these activities, be it in Chile and the rest of the regions, and this is how, like our representative said today in the morning, we were the first bank to put money to support the Green Hydrogen Fund, and we are committed with this and with other projects of the same subject. Thank you very much. We will put other figures on the table. Many of you know and know these figures, but just to have in mind, an electrical vehicle needs 6 times more minerals than a conventional vehicle, and wind energy plant, wind power plant needs more minerals, and we need also to see the vulnerabilities in the challenges, because we are only a few countries that can hand these raw materials and know how to handle this and how to do it in a right way. Not only do it, but do it in a right way. And what Sebastian was saying regarding the figures for climate change, and let's add then there also that not only in a few countries is that we don't have all of the knowledge of this tradition, we have to do it quite well, and we have urgent matters that are more important. But if we needed to produce it more, if we did only produce traditional vehicles or conventional energy, so we need to put other figures on the table, but not to be so pessimist. But lithium, the reserves of 38% of lithium, 2/3 of the world reserves of lithium in the region, and 38% of copper. Latin America has a very important role that they have to play. And how? We're going to discover it today. Codelco, they must know, right? Good afternoon. In the name of Codelco, I would like to thank for the invitation. And I would like to also compliment the two previous panelists. There is no doubt that in the fight for climate change, these minerals have a relevant role, and we know that Codelco, we have so many years in this area. Now we're getting into the areas of lithium, and South America specifically is a very looked upon uh, place for these minerals because of the tectonic plates around the Pacific Ocean. But the challenge is, in, when we observe it in practice, is important. Since 2014, Chile does not grow in its copper production. And when we compare the demand that is weighted like the undersecretariat says, because of the offer of these minerals, of course, there's a tension that emerges that we need to be able to comply with this. And our role as a company from the state, so many years that we have been operating in this country, we need to be able to comply with these numbers. And we know we need to take accountability, and we know the challenges to be able to develop new projects. And Chile has a very important role, and we need to call all of the actors in such way that we would be able to develop the conditions that at least lithium and copper industry can grow. We need to grow in these areas. And there is important news in Codelco, and we're going to talk about this later on. I don't want to spoil anything. And I'll give the word to Patricio, so to give their point of view from Anglo.
¿Se escucha, sí?
You hear me, right? Well, first, thank you for the invitation. I think this discussion is highly relevant, and as well as the diversity of thinking, particularly by already listening to the panel. I would like to clarify, well, to state that this is indeed the biggest challenge that we have as humanity. The leaders for climate change, according to them, well, I joined their board last year, and I was surprised to hear that out of the 59 CO2 equivalent, we need to reach 43% reduction in this decade, out of the 70% by the end of this decade, and we will only reach 7% out of that 43. So the sense of urgency needs to change. I think that's first. We must not forget, I would say, around critical minerals. We all recognize the role in the transition, but I believe we also must recognize very humbly that we are part of the transition, but also part of the problem. Why am I saying this? Because mining contributes with approximately 5 to 7% of the CO2 emissions, CO2 equivalent emissions around the world. And saying otherwise would be lying. I would say that we not only need to bring the minerals to the market as a solution, but we need to be part of the we need to recognize ourselves as part of the problem. And in that sense of urgency that I was mentioning, we are speaking of magnitudes, as the undersecretary was saying, that are unprecedented when we think that the amounts of copper will need 27 tons more in the next decade. We're speaking of numbers that we have never seen in the past. Los Bronces, for you to have an idea, operating in the metropolitan region, we're speaking of 60 mines of the size of Los Bronces that need to be operational in the next decade. So it's not just about investment, it's about how to bring that mineral into the market. And I would say that the pace needs to change radically. So when we think of that, and yesterday we were sharing some information with a different audience, from the moment when an ore deposit is discovered and the permits are given, and then you start mining, we're speaking of 15 to 20 years that the mineral enters the market. So again, the sense of urgency needs to be different, but the way in which we're bringing those minerals into the market needs to change too. And we'll share this along the session, but we need to be more deliberate as producers and as industry in our ESG targets, because those need to be more aligned with the financial value, but more over with the sustainable thinking. Now, the good news is that when there's a firm will, I was actually reading in the memory of Anglo American, 6% will be used of renewable energy in their operations of Brazil, Chile, and Peru, and they already have advanced in this. As I was checking, their energy requirements for nickel in Brazil operations since 2022 have been covered with renewable power, or in Chile since 2021 have been as well. So I believe that when concrete and clear targets are established, it's possible. It's not just about producing sustainably then, it's about the political will or the private wells. I will give you the floor because we know that for Chile this can be an opportunity, but an
Muchas gracias,
opportunity
Mónica. Qué
of what and
difícil
how.
estar último
Well, thank you,
respondiendo la misma
Monica. It's
pregunta sin
hard to
repetir
be the
conceptos.
last one without
Porque aparte
repeating
creo que todos los
concepts
panelistas lo han
because
dicho súper
besides all
bien.
of the panel members
Tenemos
have said
una
so
bendición
well, we have
en Latinoamérica, que es
we're
que
blessed
contamos
in Latin
con
America because
recursos
we
naturales que son
possess
fundamentales
natural
para
resources
la
that are
transición.
fundamental for the energy transition. But also we have this huge challenge because the way that we mine these resources will determine if we manage to bring them into the market and we manage to have a fair energy transition so that it's successful. Something that was mentioned earlier that I liked very much is that in 20 more years, our children will look at us and the youth will look at us and we can tell them that we did our best to extract these minerals in the most sustainable way possible. That is our challenge. Lithium is contained in Latin America, mainly in salt flats. And these salt flats are highly protected, very sensitive areas, not only environmentally, but also socially. So that's the how. And I would like to focus this on my answer, how to meet this demand, as the undersecretary was saying, that will grow exponentially and that will dictate if we are successful or not in our energy transition. Undersecretary, this is for you. We know more that in the Latin American context and the Chilean context, we are attractive for Europe and for other big countries, but for the food industry, even more with the war in Ukraine and the geopolitical consequences that has, grain production, etc. But for food security, besides energy and what we can contribute in that, but what is Chile gaining from this, and what does Latin America obtain by becoming strategic partners? And this, of course, is still part for an important partner for U.S. because of the critical minerals. But what does Chile obtain from this? Because we've seen in the past that we give our raw materials, but we do not necessarily see in the population a benefit with the social licensing. We don't see a benefit. So how do we see something that remains in time as a value? That is the challenge, Monica, indeed. Nowadays, we have examples of mining that have been done correctly, but also done poorly with communities that do not back them. But there are feasible projects that communities do not want. So something that I've learned along the way is that part of what needs to be done is not only start seeking, exploring for material, but winning the communities over and ensuring the countries that they will be benefited from the mining and the extraction. How? Well, first, by not damaging their environment, and second, by guaranteeing that the communities will participate from the profits and will have a part of the profits, and find a way that this is done sustainably too, creating schools, roads, etc. Otherwise, from what we have learned is that this will not be built, will not be achieved, these projects. What we're doing now in order to promote and incentivize this, we've created a group of 3 countries plus the European Union, representing over 50% of the world GDP, vast part of the investment, and we have 4 pillars. First, exchanging information, information sharing, jointly investing, recycling, something we do not talk much about, and the batteries, for instance, in cars need to be of recycled materials in the future and do it right. Following the high standards in social matters, in governance, and all of the aspects. That is something that in my conversations with countries in Latin America, but not only in Latin America, but in Africa and other continents, has been key. When you talk to leaders and rulers were, what do you want? They want technology progress. They want benefit for their society. They don't want to be just a place for extraction, and that's what we are promoting. We are trying to convince the countries that they can be benefited, not only convince them, but guarantee that to them. In the Mineral Security Partnership, we have published in black and white for people to know the principles that we'll be complying with. And in regards of technology transfer, well, as you well know, with raw materials, this can be a blessing or a curse. The curse with raw materials, oil, let's say, or as saltpeter was at some point, where we're focusing on extracting that raw material and not adding value. That is highly studied in political science. So, what about um, transference of technology? We have seen that as the curse, and that is what needs to be done for adding value. Technology transfer is part of the organization that we've created. They actually prefer it. It is much easier to process lithium closer to the mine site than taking it to the other part of the world where they don't have control over. So, in my opinion, we have seen that producer countries and the companies too are gaining more from this model of economy. Sebastian, what can you tell us about the Inter-American Development Bank, about the dissemination of information and scientific evidence? If we do not do anything and we reach over 1.5 degrees of temperature increase, we've heard the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, negating, denying climate change. We heard President from Brazil, Bolsonaro, saying the same thing, and there are others. So, what to do when facing these? How to permeate? How to convince with scientific evidence? Thank you for that question. It's a complex question. I'll start saying that in many places the evidence has been the people's experience. I would say in Chile, well, I've been working for over 20 years in climate change. 20 years ago in Chile, this was not an issue. It was talked about by some people, the crazy ones. One says climate change now, and everyone knows about it, droughts or floods or landslides, etc., because they lived it. Uh, Now we have vast knowledge and a lot of publications about this problem. I would say the problem is well diagnosed, is well identified, but there's also a lot of uncertainty. But what can we do about it? There's more recent work. There's actually two papers that came out recently, one about climate change and one about adaptation to climate change, about specific actions for countries to take and companies, not only nationally but sectorally. What can each of the sectors do to mitigate and solve part of the problem, and what can they do in terms of adaptation? How can they better use the territories, the hydrological resources, etc.? So all of that is done based on evidence, studies that take some time, evidently. And these two publications in particular, I like very much because they do not argue about raising taxes or else. It's just measures. But how to conduct these actions? Well, that will depend on every country. It's not a one size fits all kind of document. that will depend on every country, every counterpart. I would say that's what we can do. Now, about negationism or this cultural denial, it's complicated. It's complex. Of course, particularly when it's at a larger scale because it permeates, yes. But first, when you start to look at this, and I'm pointing to this morning's panel, the younger generations are generations that are looking at this, and if you survey among them, you don't see this happening in younger generations, this denial. At least it's a problem that should be getting solved as they assume positions of leadership throughout the years. And now we'll talk to you, Nicolas. Codelco started to take position over Maricunga salt flats and not working only on copper but lithium. There's still some doubts about Codelco being capable of working with lithium, particularly when there's debt and low productivity issues in comparison with the private world. So there's permanent tension of providing resources to the state and the capacity that Codelco has to invest and develop new projects, because otherwise the capabilities of producing are finished. So we see the positive and the negative side. So in all of this turmoil, what do you do? We've seen why, because we need more copper and more lithium, but at the same time, we know that we require large amounts of water in a country that is living a mega drought and where many critical sites, because in Chile, many places are living with water tanks, water trucks at a high cost for people's dignities and economic cost. So, how do you work in this scenario when requiring more water, more energy? Of course, thank you for the question. It is a very difficult challenge. We are aware of it at Codelco, and that is the big paradox in this greater demand for critical minerals. But to produce all of these minerals, we require more water, more power, which could be in contradiction of the ultimate end of solving climate change and the supply of copper and lithium. We cannot. We cannot deliver in traditional conditions with the use of continental water. The large industry of water, not only Codelco, but the industry in general, has taken on this mission rather strongly, and we see numerous projects of desalination plants that will take us to the end of this decade with only maybe two-thirds or three-quarters, depending on how certain projects develop. Will have water supply from the sea. And that's one part of the story. But the other story is to achieve better efficiency in our processes, becoming more dry, particularly at our concentrator plants. But at Codelco, we see this as an opportunity because, as few other mining companies, we have the main ore deposits around the world that we need to value, but monetize. But at Codelco, we have changed two-thirds of our energy grid to renewables. We are participating in tenders of almost 500 gigawatts an hour. That is about 30% of our consumption, also with sources of that kind. So we need a greater production, but under a different logic. And I would like to focus on a key element. Our owner changed. The Chileans 20, 30 years ago, our owners demanded financial resources to develop different social programs, and that was a very important event in the decade of the 90s. Today, that challenge is not enough, and we need to develop that in balance with the other components. So we are, I insist, taking this very seriously. We have projects, and out of the 40,000 million, 20,000 are the famous structural projects to renovate our reserves, but the other 20,000 are about being accountable for very old projects that need to be aligned with the new times. And in that context, having this tension of having to provide resources for Chileans, which is what validates their existence. We know that copper is Chile's salary. So in that context, but also having the evidence with other several private companies of lower productivity. Uh, why could you be better at lithium if in copper you're not having the greatest productivity? Well, let me target that debt question. The way of becoming in debt depends on the owner, and our owner has decided that we are permanently providing. Delivering all of the resources. We have $70 million. We have up to the closure of the third quarter, we are delivering. We could have been capitalizing. That is a decision that we need to solve with our board of stakeholders and with the state, but it is not only up to the company, but to the future, the capitalization will be a matter of discussion, of course, but Codelco has an expertise of many years, over 50 years as a state company linked to mining. Just to remind you, there was a very similar question in the decade of the 70s, uh, when due to the nationalization, the engineering of the U.S. capital was not going to this able make this possible, but quite the opposite. Several of our operations have been emerging since that time. But we also need to be aware that we have 100 years old deposit as Chuquicamata that require all of the investment that I've talked about. But we have vast expertise in mining, not only better our deposit, but excellent qualified professionals of all disciplines. In the industry of copper, the big industry of copper is one of the few industries that is in the state of art of its disciplines. You'll find that in Canada, that you have very similar characteristics to ours, and we have excellent quality of professionals. That is our competitive advantage, our expertise, our years of resilience, of solving problems. Codelco has transformed in many times and will do it again. Okay, we'll continue now with Patricio. Patricio, what do you think if you had to share your experience as a company? Well, what to do to push sustainability in the mining sector? Is there something that the mining sector could be doing to bring the benefits to a more inclusive scale? What are the barriers that you are facing to do that? What are the barriers that companies are facing? It could be communities, but also in your internal functioning, in your internal culture. That is an excellent question. Perfect. I would say first is that we need to be deliberate in our goals, but also how do we change our paradigms and in our assets. A few years ago, we implemented the sustainable mining plan, seeking to optimize our assets not only based on our financial outcomes, but to create value more broadly with sustainability as the first pillar. And that is a spoiler that you that you gave us about the emissions reduction in Alcance 2. We've already reached 100% production in 2021 in Alcance 1. Well, our biggest challenge lies in the truck fleet, and that is where technology and innovation becomes relevant for us. We have been pioneers in the development of technologies with green hydrogen for South Africa, and we're working to bring that technology to scale. And I believe that collaboration is hugely important for that work. We're working with external expertise, external to Anglo. We are working jointly and with through public policies too, to bring that technology to scale, which is what we're working on today to solve those challenges of scope 1 and scope 3, which is much more complex when one thinks about the value chain, seeing the collaboration level that needs to happen in the value chain. We have our commitment to reduce our emissions of scope 3 in 53% by 2040. So for scope 1 and 2, we are committed by 2040 to reach carbon neutrality, and in scope 3, 50% in the same period. And that level of collaboration, both in the private and public, is truly relevant to reach our goal, but you need to be delivered. Secondly, we need to be concrete. And what do I mean by this? Well, first, in terms of the responsible chains, we have started this work when IRMA was developed as a policy. We wanted to be a part of that, collaborating, and that our sustainable commitments would embrace that transparency and copper mark. I know many of us producers are on the same page, but all of our operations today have that copper mark seal, that certification already, and that is part of our commitment to transparency. And regarding 80, one of our policies allow us to bring that transparency not only internally but to the market, with the communities and our clients. In matters of, well, being concrete with our goals, our targets, can involve many examples. We have undertaken this commitment that Los Bronces will not use fresh water in this decade. That is a huge commitment from the perspective of investment. But not only that, we're working strongly on solving or trying to solve and helping solve drought in Chile. We have a project that on a first stage will deliver 500 liters per second to the operation that is already under construction. On a second stage that is still under approval, that would deliver other 500 liters per second, but to the community, so that we can use industrial waters for our processes. So how do we generate that value for the communities and think of the problem more structurally and not only internally? Associated to that same thing, Los Bronces Integrated not only was approved in matters of their merits for sustainability perspective, but also in its processes, we have committed additional measures to solve the matters of contamination by emissions of dust in Chile, with which we are committing the replacement of wood-based heaters that in 10 years would be in compliance with PM 25 in Chile, which, as many of you know, has been an eternal fight in the region. And I would say that something very relevant for us in that process is to work with the territories and understand what the problems are beyond our operations to help them solve them and not be part of the problem. I know that Escazú plays a key role, and we welcome that. We embrace it. And to be frank, in our discussions with the government, Escazú is very it's something that's there and it can be accelerated, of course, but it has gained relevance, and we hope that it continues to be the case. I think something crucial is that we won't solve climate change if we do not bring more technology and innovation. That is paramount. Another work that we can do with the government to bring technology, but is to develop capacities, to develop skills in Chile. We just signed recently an MOU with Corfo, Colbún, Fundación Chile, and with a startup that's called Word, in which we are investing jointly to develop the first boost of green hydrogen in Chile with skills developed in Chile, in which we can bring that technology to scale, not only seeing skills in Chile, but with the need of collaborating and bringing technology to the country. Patricio, do you believe that local communities have a good rapport with you as a company, have good communication with you, know what you're doing, and what happens with the rest of the country as community? Because I'm under the impression that it's not necessarily well known what you're doing in mining and what the forestry industry is doing as well. If we go out and survey the people on the streets, I would say, what does the forestry industry exporting today? They will say logs, but not maybe moldings or anything more finished than that. So, do we have a good communication? system or and the mining industry, is it dedicated to communicate what they're doing? There are many ways to do it, of course. No, undoubtedly, and I think that it was discussed in the previous panel, and after living in Australia, which is also a mining country, I don't know that is a big issue as well. The greenwashing or the ground washing, the brown washing is happening all the time, but I believe that we can communicate better, and I think there's Consejo Minero is doing a great job in terms of the mining commitment to show us an industry what the actions being taken really are, and I would say transparency is key. I think that things that are being done well need to be more communicated, and the things that are we need to explain the things that are doing wrong. Sometimes we make the mistake of uh, talk to each other as minors with minors and not listen to the communities more broadly to understand their problems at the community level and how we can support them.
Thank you, Ignacio. What are the most critical subjects to be able to move forward in more production regarding the Atacama salt flat? Uh, when you were talking about added value, what happens in Chile? In Chile, we need to be proud. We have 43 years as a country producing lithium chemicals. We have an industry in Antofagasta that produces what we take from the salt flat, and in Chile there are not raw materials, they're not crushed rocks. There are chemical products that are in the batteries, especially in the cathodes of the batteries. And this is a great story. We talk about Australia as a great lithium producer. Australia has a capacity of production of conversion of lithium that is even lower than Chile. So we have to enhance this, empower it, and we hope to have more competition in the areas in Chile and to open new operations. As the challenges in the salt flat in Atacama, it goes hand in hand with the rest of what the panelists were saying. How do we implement technology? How do we implement new ways of doing things to be able to enhance production? For example, specifically, lithium talks about the direct extraction technology, which would allow us to enhance production in the operations that already exists and open new operations. And it goes also hand in hand with the national lithium policy accepted by the government. And this technology has a lot of challenges, which we are trying to tackle in a very concrete way. Not only to say that we do certain things, but to show with concrete actions how do we work on them. For example, the direct extraction uses a lot of fresh water, and the difference of the process that we use to date is a process of natural purification through the energy of the sun. And we know that this water cannot come from the continent. It cannot be water that we need to compete with the indigenous community or with the farmers or tourism. We signed an agreement with a business that is called Kramsa, that is a multi-purpose business, that is a very emblematic company. We are very glad to know that in the rest of South America they have similar projects. It looks to bring water to certain areas of the region that don't have access to drinkable water. These are areas of the city of Antofagasta or Calama that are outside from the city, and they need concessions to be able to bring drinkable water and then at the same time serve the industry. That means we are not looking to build our own desalinization plant to be able to fulfill our business, but we need to partner with other private companies to be able to, so this company brings water to the community and solves our own water problem without using water from the continent and continental water. And the second, the direct extraction uses a lot of energy. We need to improve production without improving our digital mark. So we have contracts this year, just like Codelco was mentioning, that we have 100% of the energies that we use from the network is non-conventional renewable energies. So the third challenge that we see is that the direct extraction technology enables the uh, non-use of lithium. That means taking out the salmon of the brine of lithium and then giving it back to the salt flat. This has not been tested, the reinsertion of brine. And without this part of the process, we will not be able to say that this is a sustainable process. That's why we started with a permit and we started with a pilot to be able to reinsert brine in the salt flat. And we have had great results without all of these things, without implementing new technologies or different sources of waters that are not continental waters, without consuming renewable energies, without the reinsertion of brine. We cannot do this. All of this helps us to take concrete action. To the end of the decade, we can transition to this new technology. Wow, time flies by, huh? Undersecretary, I have a complex question. How do you evaluate two things? How do you evaluate the relationship with the actual government of Chile right now to be able to partner with them to take advantage of the opportunity? It's now or never, and or other country will take the possibility. How do you see the current government, more than the amazing words that you have to say from the diplomatic point of view? And on the other hand, how can the United States and the European Union can be more interesting partners to Chile than China? This is not a competition, Monica. It is to give goods to a country. If we have investments, we have investments for many countries, but these are be investments that will be benefit for the people and the businesses, the companies. When we talk about the relationship to Chile, we were just had a meeting with President Boric in Washington. We had a very warm, heartwarming meeting with him, and I think that from the point of view of the United States, what we are talking about with Chile, and I believe that we share Chile's vision, is that we need to have urgency, a sense of urgency. Us in the United States, we have the sense of urgency. Why? Because the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed a year ago is the biggest investment done in the world, $370 million in technology, in green technology, be it for green hydrogen or EVs, for batteries, for wind energy, etc. This is an investment that is going to put the United States in a scenario where they're talking about these technologies, but also investing, and we want other countries to do something similar. Today we talked a lot about permits in Chile and the United States, and we all have to work on these permits and pass them to be able to invest. We're talking about investments and export. The Exim Bank has a process to be able to speed up these permits, and I'm sorry, the permits, the loans, and they can speed up these loans. And today we are seeing a sense of urgency and need to collaborate with the private sector. Another figure that we can add here, we're not talking about the future, we're talking about today in 2023. We have 37 companies that work with vehicles that have announced that they're going to invest $1.3 trillion in EVs and electrical batteries for vehicles. This is an emergency, it's an opportunity, and we want to collaborate with the private sector and public sector. This is what we're doing, and I believe, since I've had many talks with my Chilean colleagues here, Chile shares this ambition and vision. Excellent. And what are the concrete work that you're developing and other government agencies of the United States are working on to collaborate as regional government to establish state policies? How do we achieve state policies, dual relationships between one government and the other, when there's climate change, for example, and a possible election? Maybe it could be Donald Trump nowadays that is elected, and he doesn't believe in climate change. So how do we do it in spite of the government that is at that time. How do we it could happen in the United States, it could happen in Brazil, it could happen in Peru. How do we keep the work going on independent of the government who is working at the time? I think that the climate change is it's not a fantasy, it's a reality, and they have seen it. They are facing the challenges or the consequences, be it in Florida or in other places of of the world. And I believe that what are we doing? We are working with a lot of countries in the world that don't know exactly done a study in their territory of what they can observe and tackle. There are many countries in Latin America and Chile that have not done this. We're talking about norms and policies to be able to establish it and make investments quite faster and easier without always having in mind investigation, environmental investigation. This cannot be done putting in line our environmental goals. And several countries and the European Union has invested and financed. So that means that we're supporting the private sector that they didn't have the support before. A couple of months ago, we just had a conference, video conference with Argentina, who has in three provinces a lot of lithium, and we have brought three companies, Japanese, Australian, and um, that can want to invest, and we want to act as a connection of investment, be it from the public sector like ESO Bank or private sector like we're living with the $1.2 trillion that is being invested in our private sector. Thank you, Undersecretary Sebastian. I think we're going to move fast because we don't have a lot of time. They're telling me the time and we need to close soon. It is very interesting and we could stay longer speaking, but we have to follow the agenda. The president of the Inter-American Bank that is here, what are the opportunities for energy transition for all of the Latin American region? Could you tell us what are the areas that could have an impact, positive impact, or more profound or immediate impact? In which areas would be more impacted? Obviously, mining, copper, and lithium is a subject that has already been mentioned. And there's another area where we have a lot of possibilities, not only in Chile. We need to have green hydrogen. We need clean energy at a reasonable price. So, and then after that, technology. And the region has this source. So it's a region that is quite. We have clean energy. So there we have a second potential. A third element that is important is what the Undersecretary says, diversification of the value chain for different industries. And there's space for a lot of companies. They can help with technology, information, and services that can be handed. So where the region can be a hub to develop these activities, I think services are the ones that are growing in the production margin at a global level. This allows us to understand there's a great potential for development. I think those would be the most important areas. Thank you, Nicolas. Innovation is key for these next steps that are coming up. The question is, we require a lot of resources. Do we have enough resources to develop innovation from Codelco? I would like to complement with two answers. We need to invest, and we're doing it in Codelco. We're investing first in the search of these critical minerals. We need to improve our information. That is why in Codelco last year, in 2022, we invested double in investigation than we had done in the last 10 years, almost $120 million in investment, looking for both minerals, copper and lithium. And Many of the solutions are not created. That's why we need investigation and development to be able to transform this into value. And this year we spent $60 million in this area. Maybe next year is a little bit more. But this is not an investigation and development that is only executed inside the company, but it is done together with other actors. We want to call universities and civil organizations, institutions from other countries to be able to solve our challenges in the copper mining inefficiency, in our carbon footprint, and the challenges that were mentioned with the extraction trucks. How do we see that the have less impact than we have now? Maybe green hydrogen is the solution that we need, but we need development for this as well. So that's why in Coldelco we're convinced that this is an investment for the future of the company. And to close up, Ignacio, Patricio, I would like to see your point of view on national policies on lithium. What do you think of it? What do you think is missing, and what do you think is positive? First of all, I would like to say it's no secret that in Chile we only have two lithium operations going on, and this happens because we didn't have a strategy. So I would like to say this is great news that we have a declaration from the states that there's a strategy and a way to be able to develop the lithium operations in Chile. Hopefully, in 10 years more, we'll be able to say that we have more competition in the area, and there's many companies, new companies producing lithium. In the perspective, our perspective that we are in the Atacama Salt Flat, we will have to aspire differently than the rest. I'm going to ask you answer your question, but our question is to ourselves: is how do we enhance production? That's why I was mentioning technologies to enhance production before, and other actors and other salt flats. Well, we shouldn't have fear the association public-private. It started as a public-private association from Corfo, and before working in this company, I worked in a public-private association between Coldelco and a copper mining company, and this exists and is valid, and it is positive if we have clear rules. This is why now the state announced that before the end of the year, it will define a group of salt flats that are protected in Chile will not be able to be exploited, and it will be defined also the strategic salt flats where the state will have a majority participation, and everybody will have to present their business cases and see which one is the most attractive, and finally defining how is the agreement between the private sector and the public sector, how this is going to be defined. We pay a royalty or commission that is the highest in the world for the production of lithium. Last year, we were able to hand more than $650 million only in royalty or commissions, which are called here in Chile to Corfo. We also have the commitment to hand in the biggest research and development study or case. It's $300 million between the year of 2016 and 2043, and we also committed to with the indigenous population to share part of our sales. And although I'm not saying this is what needs to be copied, this is what the private businesses are looking for: clarity on these rules to be able to build their business cases, and this is how we work here in Chile. Thank you. And due to time, I'm going to speak quite quickly. I think the national strategy comes to give us clarity, at least to organize how we're going to handle lithium in the future, which is positive. I would like also to highlight that the collaboration, public-private collaboration, works. We have a collaboration with Anglosur and Codelco that has a lot of history, just like Ignacio was saying with Abra, and the opportunity, I believe, comes in how do we make this strategy come true and to give stability in the future, considering the investment that is required in mining, not only in lithium, but also how do we give investments that are of higher risks than others and bigger than others, and how do we are going to really change. And I go back to the beginning of the conversation. How do we extract specifically minerals, specifically lithium, for the innovation of So the idea is to promote and ease and make this incorporation of new technology easier. It's not a process that needs to be um, hard to do or to implement. Undersecretary, what do you think is missing in Chile to be able to be well positioned to tackle this new opportunity that is opening up for Chile in human capital, education? What is missing in Chile? What would you say, hey, Chile, look out, be prepared in these areas? I don't know. Which areas do you think need attention? I don't think there needs much attention in some areas. I think the opportunities here, you have the experience, the workforce. Chile is a leader in the technology area and the experience that they have. We hope Chile helps in other parts of Latin America so the mining industries of those countries can move forward. I don't think anything is missing. What I would say is missing what is missing for everybody. We need to stop talking about philosophy and we need to go to the work itself. Concrete subjects, implement what in the investment banking would call execution, would be called execution. Execute the planification, the plan. Know what we know what we need to do. We know how to finance this, how to invest in this, and we know because we have good examples of how countries can benefit and communities can benefit from this. So what is missing? To start. Just shoot and start and go towards our objectives, knowing that this is a race. There's a lot of people competing. It's an opportunity, but it's also an opportunity cannot be lost.
I would like to thank all panel members and ask for a round of applause. Particularly talk about the importance of discussing this. This is important for citizens to know and not leave these matters encapsulated and far from them. Now the Pan American Games have finished, but something more important comes. The Pan American Games. Hopefully, the same importance is given to that. We are we have had sign language throughout this event, as you've been able to appreciate. I'm a mother of Clara, a child who is no longer with us, who had Down syndrome, and I think it's important to mention the need for inclusion in mining and in all areas to consider people with disabilities and also remember the Pan American Games as based on what the undersecretary mentioned, because this is a good horizon for us. When we work together towards a common goal, I'll leave merit when not to be competing. That's when we achieve the best results, which is what we would like to show to the world. Thank you for having joined us. Good afternoon.
Muchísimas gracias a todos.
Thank you, everyone. We request that you come back at 2:15 this afternoon. The Ministry of Mining, Mr. Pardo, will open that session. Please come back at 2:15 to this room. Thank you.